Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku became the villain king in UA's secret rehab program? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. This was supposed to be a FING easy job, but you two had to get distracted. Well, sorry Dobby, but I wanted to see the man's beautiful blood pouring out. And I wanted his quirk before I was unable to take it. A trio of teens were running one with a limp. One had scars, a good amount of his upper body had been burned and is now scar tissue held on by staples. The second was a blonde high school-age girl covered in blood and holding the knife that caused the leakage of the vital fluid. Finally was the limping third. He had green hair that came out from behind his bunny mask, his right leg a mess of burnt muscle and skin. Yeah, well, if you dumbass hadn't been so stupid we wouldn't have to try to outrun the endeavor. You and Daddy not get along? Dobby then smacked Izuku upside the head for his little comment. That BSE isn't my dad, and you may be the boss son, but say that again and I'll cremate you. Rubbing his jaw, the Viridian-haired male tried to force his stolen healing quirk to work faster. They were in an alley that was behind the bank they had been robbing earlier. But they were unable to steal any cash because Endeavor and all FING might showed up. Coming to a dead end, the trio stopped. Sheet, what now? I don't know if you know. Guys. You're supposed to be the leader of the mission, how don't you know? Guys. I didn't think Endeavor and All Might would show up together. Guys. What? The two yelled in a perfect unison. Toga pointed at the massive figure coming their way. Oh. Sheet. Fear not, citizens, for I am here. The symbol of peace hit Toga and Dobby simultaneously, knocking both out in a single hit. And before Izuku could activate a quirk or even raise his fists, he was hit with a devastating haymaker, sending him into a wall and unconsciousness. Waking up later, he could tell he was in an interrogation room, especially when a freaking detective walked in. Mr. Midoriya, it seems as though you've been on a dark path all your life. Rolling his eyes, the Greenette looked at the elder. But since you are a minor, we are giving you our choice. And that is, go to prison or redeem yourself. Redeem myself? Attend you, at a high school. You don't have to become a hero, just attend, and when you graduate you will be scot-free in the eyes of the law. Cracking his neck and back, the kleptomaniac looked at the old man. And why would I want to join the Hero Academy? Because your friends are going there. My friends? Those dumbasses aren't my friends. The detective had a serious look upon his face, staring the minor straight in the eye. Don't lie to me, Midoriya, I have a lie detector quirk. You care for them, don't you? And if I said yes to your question? Why, I'd simply point out being in prison is a lot colder when your friends are going to get away scot-free. Contemplating his options, Izuku looked down. But I can see that you want to be in prison, so I'll go fill out the paperwork. Fine. I'll join your rehab program or whatever the hell it is. Smiling at him, the elder went to the door. Well, that's good to know, Mr. Midoriya. Izuku was taken from the interrogation room and was given clothes to change into. Clothes that looked like a uniform. Putting them on, he yelled out that he was done. The cops came back into the cell and forced him into a straitjacket and cuffed his feet together. His escorts forced him into a transport car. Izuku took a nap on the way there, not caring for what was coming. The cops violently shook him awake and forced him to walk into the school, and to a large door with Dobby and Toga waiting outside in their own versions of the cuffs. Dobby has heat-dampening gloves on and cuffs, while Toga simply had a pair of cuffs. They were forced through the door into the classroom, with teacher introducing them to the class with both their villain names and their actual names. Oh joy! Eraserhead walked into the classroom and looked at his students. Today we'll be gaining 3 new students. New students? I hope one of them is cute. Who are they? Glaring at the students until to stopped speaking, Aizawa picked up the file on the villains. They're villains. They are here as part of a rehabilitation program. What? Villains? Like hell. The 3 are teenage members of the League of Villains and they are coming in now. 3 teenagers come into the classroom. A girl with her blonde hair styled into buns with a crazy smile on her face. Second was a tall black-haired boy with burn scars and metal stitches with heat-dampening gloves on his hands. Lastly was a petite feminine male with green hair and emerald eyes, his arms trapped in a straitjacket restricting his quirk. All three had shock collars on designed to activate if they managed to get around their restraints. In order Aizawa said their names, quirks and alias. This is Toga Himiko. Her quirk is transform. If she consumes a person's blood she can become a perfect physical copy. Pointing at the scarred boy Aizawa continued. Next is Dabi, real name Toya Todoroki. His quirk is cremation. He can create flames hot enough to cremate a person. Finally pointing to the feminine male the hobo-like hero continued. Lastly is Bunny, real name Izuku Midoriya. His quirk is all for one. He can steal the quirks of anyone and use their quirks. He can also give those quirks to other people. The heroes in training were shocked at the quirk of the last. Steal people's quirks? How is that possible? That's so unmanly. It went on like that for about a minute before Aizawa stopped them. Today the villains will be having a training exercise. Grabbing some clothes he brought them to the villains. Shoving the clothes into the hands of Toga and Dabi he looked at Izuku. I'll have your guard take off your straitjacket so you can change. Looking back at the hero hopefuls he spoke. Head over to the field and don't change to your PDD clothes. With that he lead the villains to their guards. Izuku thought about the heroes he had seen as he changed. The girls were attractive, especially since the only girl his age he could compare them to his Toga. Getting the clothes on he headed out to his guard and was shoved back into his straitjacket. His guard took him outside to a large field and to where some bleachers were. Sitting at the bleachers were the hero brats, his fellow villains standing. Today the villains will be sparing. Their quirks are allowed, but if they get out of hand I will activate the shock collars. Walking up to the villains he released their restraints and hurried back to the bleachers. You can start now. Hearing this Izuku began to activate some of his quirks. Channeling height double, muscle augmentation, razor teeth, rigged bones, quad arms, strength double, and whip-like tongue. His form changed. Doubling in height his arm became rippling in muscle. Spires of bone erupting from his flesh. Lips tearing and teeth erupting. A second set of arms burst from his sides. His tongue changed, it lengthened and thinned, becoming harder, almost like leather. Strands of muscle ripped through his rippling flesh, wrapping around his form, strengthening him and protecting him. In the end he looked like so kind of monster ready to swallow Toga and Dabi whole. Well, we're fed. He charged at them on all sixes. They dodged out of his path, Dabi throwing his burning flames at Izuku. Turning his head, Izuku shot out his tongue, wrapping it around Toga, and pulled her towards one of his spires of bone. Oh, it's so wet and slimy, but it'll be better when it bleeds. Pulling the knife Aizawa had gave her, she stabbed at his tongue, cutting it open, spewing blood everywhere. He released her and pulled his tongue back into his mouth. Dabi jumped onto his back, sending a torrent of flame to it. The muscles gave way to the flames, burning down to his normal flesh as Toga distracting him, her knife flashing at his eyes. Blue flames scorched his young skin, cutting through to his normal muscle and moving to the bone. Only to stop when Dabi's shock collar activated and he collapsed to the ground, jittering. The exercise is over. I'll escort Midoriya to Recovery Girl to be healed. Their guards will take them now. Grabbing the young male carefully he led him to the nurse. After being discharged, Izuku was led to the hero brats' dorm rooms where 3 new rooms had been added. Heading into the unclaimed room, it was plain and not really his style. But they hadn't given him any decorations. The only thing in the room that wouldn't normally be there was a costume. A Playboy bunny costume with a note on it. Izuku, don't forget our bet all of tomorrow, this is your clothing. Ah shit. The next day Minato was doing his thing, peeping on the girls of UA. When he caught a glimpse of someone in a Playboy bunny costume. Him being him attempted to find the person and try to cope a feel. Turning a corner he saw a mop of green and black hair with floppy green bunny ears appearing above the fluff. Eyes went down the body following the curvature of their back, leading to curvaceous hips and a shapely rear. Grape Boy nearly drooled at the sight until he remembered the only person in UA with that hair was male. I nearly drooled at a guy. The pervert questioning his sexuality ran away to deal with the problem. Izuku was a man of his word and wore the costume. And was oblivious to all the blushing faces, nosebleeds and tightening of pants. He may be a villain, but he's pretty blind when it comes to things like this. Many of the heroes in training avoided him, wanting to keep from embarrassment, which was hard when he was just chilling in the dorm common room with his fellow villains. Izuku and Toga has been arguing about the best Disney movie when Dabi casually said he hadn't seen one. Hold on, Dabi, you've never watched a Disney movie? Not even the one where the dragon gets stabbed and its beautiful blood went everywhere? No, I've never watched a Disney movie in my life. Izuku reaching up and wrapping his arm around the taller male to stop his escape. Well, then we'll just have to remedy that. Ida had been cleaning and polishing his many glasses when his improper senses tingled. He opened his door and heard the blaring sound of a TV. Following the sound, he saw many of his fellow students crowd around the entrance of the common room. What exactly is going on? Katsuki was the one who answered. We've been trying to get this FING door open for a FING half-hour glasses. Ida ignored Katsuki's cursing and looked at the other students with a brow raised. The others had the same answer to the square boi's question. It's gotta be the villains, they're the only ones not here. Kaminari, I doubt the villains would what dashed. Momo was speaking when she was interrupted by a trio of voices singing. Part of your world. The heroes in training just looked at each other. You know what if this? Katsuki, tired of waiting, kicked in the door. Only to blush and turn away. Baku bro, where you going? He didn't answer. They looked in and saw what made him blush. Izuku was laying across one of the coach's stomach down shapely rear in the air to be admired. It was perfectly framed by his costume, the little fluffy bunny tail appearing above his rear. Underneath his shapely rear was a noticeable bulge squeezed tightly by the costume, showing a perfect outline. They all blushed and the males had to adjust their pants, embarrassed at their own thought. It looks soft. His bulge is so big. Does this make me gay? Every single one of them looked away and ran away from the common room. Izuku looked away from the movie, searching for whoever was running through the halls. The hell was that? I don't worry about it, Izuku, it's probably nothing. Toga had actually seen the 1A students admiring Izuku's feminine form. She didn't want him to know because she, like every single one of the class 1A students, whether they know it or not, wanted him for herself. Dabi would be lying if he said that he didn't want to see Izuku in that costume. He was gay, but he could never really show that when he was living with his father. The man wanted all his children to be straight, especially the ones with the more powerful quirks like him and Shudo. Sure, Shudo was the child that Enji Todoroki was working towards when he married his wife, but Toya was his backup. His flames were far hotter than his father's. Sure, he was unable to be harmed by normal flames, but his own burned him, tore his skin apart, and resulted in his current appearance. Admiring Izuku as he reminisced, he adjusted his position so Izuku wouldn't notice his problem. Izuku was wondering why the hero brats were being so weird today. Well, not only them, it was Dabi and Toga too. Everyone was so weird today. Maybe it was cause of the stupid costume. It was way too tight and it pinched his butt. How the hell do those American women wear these stupid things? Dabi and Toga just looked at him, smirking and blushing. They probably hate him as much as you do, but they get paid and you lost a bet. Dabi, if you keep smirking like that, I'll smack the shit out of you. He just kept smirking and Izuku was too comfortable to actually hit him, so he just glared at the scarred elder. The trio of villains watched a marathon of Disney films the entire day and weren't interrupted by the hero brats. Izuku stripped out of the stupid costume and showered. Getting out and toweling off the water, he headed towards his room. Not noticing the fellow teens staring at his mostly naked body. Entering his room, he ditched his towel and collapsed onto his bed naked. Izuku woke up the next day and looked for the stupid uniform he had to wear, never noticing that the door to his room was cracked open for a short time, with a certain invisible girl on the other side of the handle. Yes, Toru was sneaking into his room to take a peek. The others couldn't, as was the advantage of her quirk. She actually nearly let out a disappointed groan when Izuku slipped on some underwear, but didn't, not knowing what he'd do if he found her and not willing to find out. Oh, at least the underwear is well-fitting. Though she was still saddened that she might never get to experience him in his full naked glory again. Maybe I can sneak in while he's showering. Izuku finished dressing as he left the room. He could have swore he heard but couldn't find where it came from, so decided that it was his imagination. The greenette almost entered the classroom when a hand grabbed the back of his straitjacket, pulling him away from the door and slamming him into the wall beside it. Deku, where the hell did you go? Ruby red eyes flooded his vision. Bakugu, where I went is none of your business. The angry boy flinched when he used his actual name. Like hell do you know what you leaving did to Auntie Inko? Who? Confusion flashed into the eyes of the boy with the explosion quirk. Who? Your mother, Deku. The greenette quirked his brow at his fellow teen. My mother died when I was born. I have no idea who you are speaking of. Shrugging after the confused boy's hand, he moved into the classroom, sitting with his fellow villains. All Might ripped open the door, yelling, I am here, coming in like a hero. He told the students of what they were doing that day. Heroes versus villains. The heroes got to wear their costumes. Oh yes, and villains, you will be receiving your costumes again. All Might handed their costumes to them each. Izuku's was a purple hoodie that covered his butt and crotch, black leggings, a pair of slightly oversized red sneakers, and a green bunny mask with a vicious smile, which was not separated for male and female, so they expected them to not look. Izuku didn't watch as the others changed, but they did as he changed, looking away quickly when he finished. Pulling on his mask, he spoke. Now then, let's show those hero brats we mean business. When they were outside, the exercise was described in more detail. 2 heroes and 2 villains would be fighting in a building. Villains defending a hostage and the heroes trying to get them. Hostages could not move on their own, and they had to keep any restraints that the villains place on them must stay. Soon the first hero team and the first hostage were chosen. Hero team Ida and Ojiro. Hostage Mina. Villain team Dabi and Izuku. They started to move toward the building villains and hostage when Dabi grabbed Izuku's shoulder and whispered in his ear, I got another bet for you, Izuku. Whichever one of us loses the most fights has to wear only a thong for an entire day. Izuku looked at the scarred elder and nodded. You're on. The hero team entered the building quickly, coming across Mina on the 2nd floor. It was dark, her mouth was taped, she was blindfolded, and her limbs were tied. Ojiro picked her up with his tail and told Ida to keep a lookout and ran for the exit, coming to it and getting out, waiting for All Might to declare the heroes the winners, but it never came. Then he looked at Mina. Sure, the feminine form was there, but the hair and skin were wrong. And the horns were broken pieces of stone. Izuku twisted around and kicked Ojiro in the head, knocking him out, and used the capture tape on him. Running into the building still wearing Mina's costume, he headed to where Mina actually was, only to be knocked on his butt by Ida running by with Mach speed with Mina, who was wearing his outfit, in his arms. The hero team was declared the winner. After the entire day, the list of the villains' losers went like this. Toga 3. So Izuku showered, coming out of the shower with towel on, and headed to his room, not caring of the looks sent his way, and came into his room seeing the thong on his bed with a note. Throwing the female underwear into his dresser, he collapsed onto his bed. You may have realized that this FIC is extremely self-indulgent. Mineta was doing his thing again after finally reconfirming his sexuality, only to come across a pale form. His eyes bulged following the curvature of the person's back, leading to curvaceous hips and a shapely rear barely covered by a thong. Wait, this seems familiar. Then the person he had been peeving on turned, and Mineta saw the bulge in the thong, and promptly ran away crying, questioning his sexuality once more. The students of 1A were heading to the common room. Entering it, they saw a sight they wouldn't ever forget or want to. Izuku chilling in a thong. The hell, Deku? Holy shit. I'm not gay, I swear. This continued as every single one of them who had seen him began to have a nosebleed. Even Bakugu. Blood flowed so much that the couch Izuku was on began to float. The F-. Izuku, seeing the people staring at him, waved dumbly and left for his room. His fellow villains entered the common room once he left. The F was that sheet. Yelled, you know who? Izuku lost a bet to me and Dabi, so he has to wear that. So that's why he was dressed as a Playboy bunny? Yes. Yep. Was the cheerful answer. And why the hell would he ever wear that sheet? Izuku's a man of his word. At that they all remained silent, Until Toga suggested a old hero movie from before Quirks. They watched it but it was kinda weird. So this guy has super healing. Yep. And he's crazy. Yep. He's also trying to get his girlfriend back but is nervous too cause of his looks. Yep. How is this a hero movie again? Because he does the stabby on the bad guys. All the heroes just looked at Toga after she said that. Once they actually finished the movie they mostly dispersed. Until Momo noticed something. Aren't you going to do your homework? She asked the villains. No. Was the simple response. And why not? Because we don't give a shit about this hero bullshit. Yeah, anarchy forever. Momo just left it at that. She didn't want to make the Toga girl angry who knew what she would do. Katsuki headed to Izuku's room. Only to be interrupted by Kirishima. Baku bro, where you going? F off, weird hair. He shoved the redhead away and ripped open the villain's door. To see him working on a notebook labeled with the name Quirk Analysis. You're working on another one of those things, Deku? Katsuki sounded strangely calm. You keep calling me that and I still don't know why. A questioning look was directed at the ash blonde. Red eyes tried not to look at green. We grew up together, you were quirkless and I wasn't, and you wanted to be a hero even though you had no quirk. Guilt filled Katsuki to his core. And then one day you disappeared and Auntie Inko just broke. Tears fell from the ruby red eyes. I'm so sorry, Dek. Izuku, I only wanted to keep you from getting hurt but I ended up hurting you. He fell to his hands and knees, salty tears hitting the floor. But Kugu, right? The ash blonde's head raised. I don't remember any of this. All my life I have lived with my father, so I have no idea what you are talking about. He stood, making his way over to the ash blonde and moving past his kneeling form. Now, Bakugu, I'd prefer if you never spoke to me again. Green hair brushed the top of the doorway as the greenette left the crying ash blonde in his room. Katsuki eventually picked himself back up and headed to his own room, avoiding the others who attempted to ask him about his puffy red eyes. He ripped open his door and collapsed onto his bed. Falling audibly onto the bed, he pressed his face hard into his pillow and cried himself to sleep, regretting his actions that caused his former best friend to become a villain. Izuku woke up on the common room couch the next morning. He was on top of Dabi with Toga. Dabi's hand was a bit too close to his rear for comfort. The greenette slipped out of the tight hold of the scarred Todoroki and went to the bathroom. Tease like he completely forgets his childhood. Bakugu. Izuku went closer to the ash blonde's door. Wait, you're coming here today? Explosions ripped from the clenched fist of Baku. No, Auntie, he's dangerous, he could kill you. Still puffy ruby red eyes darted around after he yelled, not spotting the hidden greenette. Sorry, Auntie, okay, yes, Auntie, okay. Izuku slipped away and went to the bathroom and then his room after. He collapsed onto his bed and went to sleep. When he woke, he was being dragged out of his bed by All Might. Come now, young Midoriya, it is time to see your mother. My mom is dead. The hero shook his head at that and pulled him fully off of the bed. Fine, damn it. Izuku met with Dabi outside some kind of meeting room and looked for the crazy beach. Where's Toga? Dabi just shrugged his shoulders. Midoriya, Izuku, come in. He headed to the only other door and sat down at the table inside. The room was split in two by a wall of quirk-proof glass. With the only part of the room where the two people on either side could actually physically touch or give something to the other was a slot in the glass on top of the table. A woman came in. She had green eyes, red and puffy from crying. Her green hair had gray streaks from stress and age. She was thin, too thin to be healthy. And she had a mark around her neck where it seemed like she tried to hang herself. Izuku, my baby. The woman began crying once she saw him in the straitjacket. Have we met? She seemed taken aback from his words. Izuku, I'm your mother. His head was starting to hurt. What are you talking about? My father told me my mother died in childbirth. Her eyes widened. Father? Green eyes stared into an identical pair. Yes, my father. Izuku, your father died when you were young, shortly after your 6th birthday. His head was throbbing. What are you talking about? I was raised by my father to be his successor. Honey, no, your dad was a businessman who worked overseas. An immense pain erupted from his skull and blood came from his nose. Izuku! He fell to the ground convulsing. Help, help! There's something wrong with my son. Izuku woke up later in the nurse's office hearing voices from across the room. Ori quirk. What did it do to my baby? It completely changed his memories. He has no memory of you, the Bakugas, or of being quirkless. He faded to sleep. When he woke up again, Toga had her face pressed against his groin. Luckily his pants were still on. Toga, the F, are you doing? She looked up from his crotch and smiled. What, Izuku? I was just taking a nap. And you used my groin as a pillow? Yeah, it's super big and soft, so perfect pillow. He just stared at her and proceeded to kick her off of the bed. Young Midoriya, what do you want? The blonde America-obsessed dumbass pointed at him. You're wanted for a mind screening. I what? The hero's cape flapped in non-existent wind. It's where a person with a memory showing quirk shows us heroes your memories so we can know how much all for one has altered your mind. My father has never altered my mind. The hero picked him up and ran to a room on the other side of the building in a single minute. I have no choice in this, do I? Nope. Izuku was put in a room with a comfy-looking chair and a stiff straight-backed chair that was occupied. In the room there was a window that behind it were the heroes in training, All Might, Eraserhead, Dabi, and Toga. Izuku, right, sit down and let's get started. He sat in the chair knowing he had no choice. The woman dressed in a black skin-tight bodysuit with gray trims and a white cloak with a hood leaned over him and kissed him firmly on the lips, activating her quirk. Her breath filled his mouth and then his lungs. And when he breathed out, a thick white cloud went into the air forming a screen. Izuku passed out. He was playing in the park when a man came up to him and grabbed him. The man dragged him to a black portal kicking and screaming for help. But no one came, no one cared about a quirkless brat. He was dragged to a room with black and white checkered floors. I want his mind broken. A broken mind is far easier to twist than a normal one. But before the man left, he clasped his hand on Izuku's small skull and forced purple lightning through his skin. What ya doin' to em? I'm giving him a healing quirk. It heals the wielder fully but with the cost of twice the pain inflicted. With that he was left with a large man. He was strapped into a chair by the man. The massive man went over to a table full of many surgical instruments. Large hands grabbed a pair of massive pliers. Walking slowly, the brute placed the pliers on one of the boy's fingers. Sniff. Off it came. Uraraka started to feel like she was going to vomit at the sight. Sniff. Mina fell to the floor in horror. Sniff. Shoji tried to control his disgust. Sniff. Kirishima winced and tried to not vomit as another finger left the 6-year-old. Sniff. Dabi's eyes twitched as he saw the boy he was attracted to in so much pain. Sniff. Toga for once wasn't excited by the sight of blood. Sniff. Bakugu trembled with rage. Sniff. Ajui's eyes opened even wider than usual. Sniff. All Might lost his smile. Sniff. The brute kept taking fingers until Izuku had none left. Then he snapped off his toes. When he had no more of those, he went to his teeth. But he didn't tear them out with the pliers. No, he beat the boy with his fists until all of his teeth were on the floor. Then the BSRD scooped out his eyes with a melon baller. I'll let you heal, kid, then we'll do all of this all over again. And the man's words held true. He kept taking his fingers, toes, teeth, and eyes over and over again. Over and over. Over and over. Over and ing over. Until Izuku finally snapped. He started smiling and laughing at the pain the big BSRD inflicted upon him. The man came back. It seems you have done your job successfully. Hey, I always get the job done, boss. Now for your payment. The man raised his arm and killed the torturer. Now then, my child, how about we fix your mind? He had him tortured. Bakugu exploded the couch. Yeah, Baku bro, we were there. The other heroes in training were in the common room trying to get over their queasiness. Where is he right now anyway? Asked Kaminari. In the nurse's office with my mom and his. Mitsuki. Bakugu thought of Inko like a sister and treated her son like her nephew. So she was horrified to see the state he was in. MIF fingers si commoning OFFF o viver and o viver IIW pine titus stop. The hell is going on with him? Recovery girl sighed and spoke. He's having phantom pains from the memories being resurfaced. Is my baby ever going to be the same? She looked away and sighed. All I can say is maybe. Inko broke down, collapsing to the floor crying. Dabi and Togo were shocked. Their friend, Crush, had been tortured by their boss, the man who called himself the boy's father. Not only tortured but driven completely insane. Dabi, does this mean we never knew the real Izuku? The scarred male didn't get to say anything before Bakugo yelled at them, his hands sparking. Did you beasters know what that fucker did to Deku? Blue eyes the same as the hero endeavors starred into ruby red. He shook his head. No, we never knew what happened to Izuku. If he didn't know, how could we? The scarred male turned and grabbed Toga. Come on, we're visiting him, and if you're really his friend like you think you are, you'll come too. Once they entered the room, they found Inko a sobbing mess on the floor. Izuku was sobbing, feeling pain that wasn't happening, speaking to himself. Until he saw Bakugo. Keikei-chan. His green eyes widened and he began saying something else. Hello, okay, Keikei-chan, I am noot qkara anyone or so pp1 and hurttme. Dabi rounded on Bakugo, grabbing him, his heat-dampening gloves smoking and his collar beeping. What the F did you do to Izuku to make him react like that? Bakugo surprisingly looked sad, his ruby-red eyes looked away from the scarred male. I bullied him when we were young before he disappeared. I thought that if I hit him every time he said that he was going to be a hero, that he wouldn't try just to be killed because he can't fight someone with a quirk. Inko stopped crying when she heard his words. Her green eyes glared at the boy she considered a nephew. Why would you ever do that to my son? Bakugo looked away, tears came from clenched eyes. Mitsuki walked up to and slapped her son. She then proceeded to grab him from Dabi. Why the hell would you do that, brat? Katsuki slapped his mother's hands away. Because I love him, damn it, and I don't want to see him hurt. Cold, bloodshot green eyes looked at the enragement child. If you loved my son, you would have never done that to him. They forced him to leave, though he never tried to stop them. A hero with a mind invasion quirk was called in to help fix Izuku. Can you help my baby? He nodded and then pointed for her to sit. The man went to the boy and sat by his side. Serious violet eyes looked into terrified green. Reaching up, the man held Izuku's head in place and leaned in, pressing his forehead to the younger male's. He blinked once, twice, thrice, and like that both he and Izuku were out like a light. Hours later, the man leaned back up, motioning for a pen and paper. The man wrote this. Your son's mind has been split. One side are his true memories that are up to where he was tortured, and the other is after his memories were altered. His mind is adjusting to its new state at the moment. Eventually, the more dominant of the two personalities will take hold. Does that mean the Izuku we know will be back? The man shook his head no. Izuku's personalities will more than likely mix into a new personality. But until then, he will have a split personality disorder. Both will want to survive and will fight to become the dominant. He cracked his neck. And when one does, the other will be absorbed and little of it will remain except for its memories. Serious violet eyes stared at the group around him. In other words, either the original broken Izuku will survive or the villain will survive. Izuku was released days later. His personality was somewhat the same, but he seemed insecure. The greenette caged in his straitjacket was in the class with his fellow villains. Today we will be having one-on-one sparring with no quirks. Izuku was against Dabi. I'm not going to go easy against you, Izuku. If you did, I'd kill you. They ran at the other Dabi, using his superior size and arm length to attempt to defeat Izuku quickly. Only for the feminine male to dodge his strike, and grabbing Dabi's arms swinging around, he wrapped his legs around his opponent's throat. He had a tight hold with his legs around the scarred male's throat, inadvertently pressing the back of Dabi's head into his crotch, causing Dabi to blush and for blood to erupt. From his nose, fingers wrapped around the lean legs of the male, attempting to pry the limbs from his throat. Dabi dropped himself to the ground, slamming his full weight into his opponent. Ah, damn it. Izuku clasped his fists together and slammed them into Dabi's face, cracking his nose. He gripped the staples in Dabi's face and tore them out. A hole. Dabi pulled himself from Izuku's legs in intense pain. The scar tissue held up by his staples fell from his face, exposing his bottom row of teeth and his jaw. Izuku dashed at the scarred male, slamming the stolen staples into Dabi's arm. Arf! Dabi lashed out, slamming the back of his fist into Izuku's face, giving him a bloody nose. Fifuck! He punched the scarred male in the face, knocking staples loose from one of his stapled-on lower eyelid, making the lower eyelid flap as the villain moved. Izuku slid in between Dabi's legs, flipping once he cleared them and wrapping his legs tight around the flame user's chest, stopping his airflow. He smacked his palms against the scarred male's temples, knocking the larger male out. Almost everyone was in the common room, villains included, but they were keeping to themselves. The only person missing was Izuku, who walked in soon after taking a shower. When he did, though, many heads turned towards him. His classmates and fellow villains looked at each other, questioning if this was real or not. A few of them, Hard Boi, Pikachu, and Grape BSRD, could only watch as his hips swish in an unconscious movement. This in fact was mostly due to the green-haired villain's choice of clothing at the moment. A soft pink crop top that ended just above his belly button, which also hung loosely off of one shoulder, plus a pair of women's leggings that tightly hugged his feminine form, which gave the impression he wasn't wearing underwear. "'Cause I'm a KNKY BSTRD. He walked through the common room, not noticing the stares, blushes, and pictures being taken of him by the resident pervert who had finally accepted that Midoriya was the exception to his sexuality. Most students had similar reactions to this. Complete and total confusion. The only ones who didn't were Dabi, who had gotten his staples replaced, Toga, who bit her finger remembering when she slipped into Izuku's bed when he was dressed in a similar way, and Bakugu, whose hands were steaming and popping, having forgotten that Izuku had worn clothes like that even when they were little. The greenette got to the fridge, opened it, and bent over, causing a mass intake of breath and even photos taken by several members of the class for later. Another mass intake of breath was caused when he shut the fridge with his hip. He walked away to his room, muttering to himself the whole way. Once he left, the heroes in training and villains in reformation looked at each other before every single one of them, excluding Koda, yelled, "He's mine!" Izuku collapsed onto his bed, adjusting his leggings so they would be a little more comfortable, and faded to sleep alone, only to wake up in the middle of the night with Toga hugging his left side, Ashido hugging his left, and Dabi somehow had gotten underneath him without waking the broccoli boy up, as his chest had become his pillow and his crotch was poking into his legging-clothed rear. Izuku decided to go back to sleep, knowing he'd never escape the trio. So he snuggled into Dabi's lap, making the scarred male groan, and faded once more to sleep. By the way, Deku pre-villain, Izuku post-villain. Deku woke up with his arms pulled into two different sets of bursts and his but being rubbed against by a scarred man in his sleep. He felt wrong, like his body wasn't his own, it was larger and stronger, and everything just felt wrong. The greenette wormed his way out of their grasp and grabbed his hair, pulling his head to his knees. Dabi woke up to sobbing. Seeing Izuku wasn't there on the bed, he got up and saw the greenette sobbing into his knees. But this wasn't the Izuku he knew. Dabi could tell that much. The Izuku he knew wouldn't be saying mommy or kakin. Right? Split personality thing. He got down on his knees and began whispering in the ear of the greenette, similar to what he had done for his baby brother whenever he could get him away from Endeavor. Deku eventually calmed down and looked at the scarred male who had helped him. Thank why you me, mister? Black eyebrows scrunched together in confusion at his words until he remembered that the original Izuku probably didn't know him. I'm Dabi, we're friends. Emerald eyes filled with surprise at his words. Your Friday friends with me? Of course I am, why wouldn't I be? See, 'cause I'm a useless quirkless Deku. Dabi promised that he would burn Bakugu alive. Just because you're quirkless doesn't mean I shouldn't be friends with you. Really? The surprise in the feminine boy's voice made Dabi's shriveled heart hurt. He picked up the legging-clad boy bridal style and sat him gently onto the bed, placing his head onto Ashido's chest as a pillow. Now go back to sleep, I need to talk to someone. Dabi left the greenette alone with the girls and went to the common room. Since it was morning, Bakugu was there. The scarred male grabbed Bakugu by his shirt, pulling him off of the couch. You made Izuku think he was worthless because he was quirkless. He yelled at the ash blonde, his hands steaming. I just wanted him to be safe. The blonde chalked out. Safe? You wanted him to be safe. Ruby Red looked into Cool Blue. Yeah, he was quirkless, he couldn't defend himself from kindergartners, so what could he do against real villains? Dabi dropped him. Bakugo didn't try to catch himself. Stay away from Izuku, you've hurt him enough for one lifetime. The scarred Todoroki walked out of the common room heading to Izuku's room. But he was stopped by his little brother on the way there. Toya, we need to talk. Toya had had enough, he was tired of his father, tired of being his father's backup. He was packing his clothes in a suitcase he had taken. It was filled to the brim and he slammed it closed. As he picked up the suitcase, he heard the door of his room open. Toya? Shudo? The scarred redhead looked at his little brother. What's wrong, little bro? Did Dad hurt me again? Toya kneeled down and hugged his brother, who bent his head to the scarred redhead's shoulder, crying into it. Shush, little bro. He rubbed his brother's back. Then Shudo looked up and saw the suitcase. Toya, are you leaving? He looked away from his brother. Why are you leaving me, Natsuo and Fuyumi? The small peppermint-haired boy hit the larger's chest with his fists. I can't take it anymore. Toya stood up and grabbed the suitcase. He walked out of the room, leaving his brother behind, and unknowingly making the abuse on him far worse. Why did you become a villain? His little brother glared icily at his scarred counterpart. I'm sorry, Shudo, I just couldn't take the abuse anymore. Shudo looked away from his brother, subconsciously rubbing his scar. Do you know how much worse you made it for me? What? When you left, he trained me even harder than before, beating me when I tried to refuse. With that, the peppermint-haired boy left his older brother behind, going to his room. Toya, in a daze, went to Izuku's room and climbed back into the bed using Izuku's chest as a pillow. How could my child have a villain's quirk? Her mommy shouted into the phone at who she assumed was one of her mommy's friends. Mommy, what's wrong? A young Toga stepped out from the doorway. Her mommy looked at her with annoyance. What are you doing up? The blonde woman asked harshly. You were yelling, Mommy, I thought you were hurt. The woman turned away from Toga and was about to go back to her conversation. But Toga asked her a question. Mommy, what were you yelling about? She looked at her 4-year-old with cold and crazy eyes. I was yelling about how my little beach of a daughter has a villain's quirk. Her yell made the young girl cry. The woman walked towards her, angrily raising her hand and bringing it down on her face. Toga woke up, heart racing. Her cheeks stung with a phantom pain. She saw Dabi, Izuku, and the pink girl on the same bed as her in Izuku's room. Our crazy blonde snuck away from her friends plus a hero brat and went to the kitchen. As she stepped out of the room, she straightened the shirt she had stolen from Izuku to hide her panties better, weaving around the hero brats in her way. I wonder how tasty their blood is? She snuck into the kitchen and made sure no one was there. Opening a drawer, she stole one of the kitchen knives and snuck away to the bathroom. The handle of the blade held by her panties so no hero brats would notice. Pulling open the door of the bathroom, she went inside. She turned on the shower, throwing off her stolen shirt and panties. Toga grabbed the knife in her hand, locking the door. Our hero killer loving blonde held it to her arm and cut her left forearm horizontally. Twice. Thrice. Thrice. Yes, I made up a fourth one. Her blood flowed from the fresh wounds and swapped the knife to her other hand, and cut her right arm the same amount. The smell of fresh blood drove her crazy. She brought her face to the cuts, liking them, turning her pink tongue red. Toga felt herself grow wet from the delicious taste. She stepped into the running shower and her blood was washed from her wounds, painting the water red. The door of the bathroom opened. But I locked it. Her head turned toward who had opened the door, and she caught sight of a head of green hair. Izuku. She watched him strip out of his clothes. Yeah. Leaving him in only his underwear. Very skimpy underwear. Very skimpy and tight underwear. He pulled them off and opened the shower door. Stepping in, he grabbed her wrists and roughly shoved her into the wall. He brought his mouth to her neck and bit down. Izuku. She ummed out a third liquid, joining the mix of water and blood. Toga removed her fingers from her delicate place and washed them. Washing her blood away, she grabbed the handle of the shower door. Pulling it open, she stepped out and grabbed a towel. She dried herself off and wrapped the towel around herself. Toga stepped out of the bathroom, forgetting the knife in it, where it was eventually found by Momo before she took her morning shower. But for now, Toga headed back to Izuku's room to go back to sleep. Once she returned to the room, she ditched the towel. Pulling on another of Izuku's shirts, she climbed onto the bed with the others and faded to sleep. In the morning, once the trio had dressed, they were dragged to the nurse's office by Aizawa. The hero with hobo style glared at them and held up the bloodied knife. "Which if you cut yourselves?" They looked at each other. It was Dabi who spoke up. "What makes you think it's us, hero? Because we already checked your fellow students, they don't have any scars on their arms. And you think I could have cut myself? Even if I did, I wouldn't feel it. The skin on my arms is just scar tissue." Regardless, they were all made to raise their arms and lower their sleeves. And the only one with fresh cuts was our lovable blonde Yandra. Toga was assigned to a therapist to help with her cutting. She was cornered by Izuku and Dabi in the common room. Izuku started their interrogation. "Why would you cut yourself? I thought you were over that. Mame BBSHE hat hates he herself el likuyuas? Shut up, Deku." The blonde looked away from the two. "I was but being here it brought back bad memories, Izukin." She rubbed her arm where the cuts were. Dabi touched the scar tissue on his lower jaw. "Yes, same, but I got to see my little brother again." Izuku looked away, rubbing his head. "They made me remember." Gripping his green hair in his hands, crazed green eyes look up. "I don't want to remember, I just don't." Izuku and Toga wanted to leave, but Dabi and Deku weren't sure. A vibrating phone was on the top of a bar counter. "Are you going to answer that, Tamura Shigaraki?" "Why should I?" A blue-haired man sat at the bar, scratching at his neck. They were captured and probably squealed everything they knew when they learned they were going to jail. Why else would they be in Udata now? Behind the bar stood a man seemingly made of black mist, with his only outstanding feature being a pair of glowing yellow eyes. He was cleaning a glass while looking at the blue-haired man. "That is true. But do not forget, Tamura Shigaraki, that Sensei will be quite upset when he learns that you didn't even try to rescue his so dashed." The man made of mist was interrupted by the blue-haired man, apparently named Tamura, slamming his palms into the counter, causing the countertop to begin to crumble as his quirk took effect. "Don't you dare call him that, Kurojairi. I was supposed to be Sensei's successor, not some brat." The man made of mist, Kurojairi, shook his head and continued cleaning the glass. "True, but their being in UA can give us an advantage." "Huh. They can pretend to be reformed and provide us with information on the operations of UA." Looked into yellow for a while before Tamura finally decided to pick up the phone. "What do you want, Bunny?" The next day was a school day again. Our favorite trio of villains sat in their restraints waiting for the class to start. Izuku was sitting in his chair meditating, ignoring his environment. Toga sat in her chair nervously rocking. Dabi was chatting with his little brother. The door of the classroom opened and in stepped a guest hero. Feather Touch, an up-and-coming recon hero who was going to teach them some recon tactics. By the way, I totally stole this character from Plants and Paint's story, Undefined. Read it, it's really good. She split the class in two. 11 students were going to be running in one of the training grounds, and the other 11 students had to track them using the tactics she taught them. Of the 11 who were running, only one of them was a villain. The villain was Izuku, who had had plenty of experience running and not getting caught by heroes. Each student was allowed to use their quirks completely and were allowed to use whatever tactics they could to complete their task. For the runners, it was to avoid the heroes until half an hour had passed, while the heroes had to catch all of the runners before that time. Runners were given a minute head start, which they most certainly took advantage of. Izuku ran up the stairs of a tall building, hoping to avoid the heroes as much as possible. While he was powerful, he'd rather not go up against Toga and Dabi since they knew the weaknesses of his quirks. He stopped to catch his breath at the door to the roof and slowly walked towards it while the muscles in his legs burned. The greenette was about to open it, but instead the door was blasted in by an explosion. The flying door hit him, knocking him on his butt. In front of him stood a smirking Bakugu. "Sorry, Deku, but I'm gonna pass." Did you hear to that Ichi talk tea to me? Beamed Deku in Izuku's head. Shut up, he was talking to me, not you. Izuku tried to stand up only to find a foot on his chest. He looked at the taller blonde and shot his effing tongue at him, smacking the blonde in his face and allowing Izuku to escape into an ambush of Toga and Dabi. Well, shit. They captured him, and he, like the other losers, was sent back to the entrance. Tamura can't make that plan of escape for us soon enough. Inko Midoriya walked into the massive school with some trepidation. The second she stepped into the school, a hero grabbed her, telling her that he'd take her to where she was needed. When he finally let go of her, they were in a waiting room that also held a blonde, emaciated man, a plain-looking man wearing a trench coat, and a giant rat. Thank you, Vlad, you can go now. Why am I here? The blonde man was the one who spoke. Mrs. Midor .. It's Ms. Midoriya, my husband is dead, so I went back to just miss. His sunken-in eyes widened. Oh, well then, Ms. Midoriya, could you tell us the name of Izuku's father? Her eyes widened in surprise. Well, he never told me his original family name, but he took on mine after we got married. The plain-looking man spoke before the others. And what was his given name, Ms. Midoriya? Hisashi. His name is Hisashi. The plain-looking man nodded. The giant rat looked as though he was going to speak, but Inko beat him to it. May I see my son? A smile appeared on the rat's face. Yes, you may, Ms. Midoriya, but it will be supervised by his fellow students, so nothing bad happens like before. Nodding, Inko stood up, leaving the room and getting directions from the man who brought her there. Toshinori watched her as she left, a small blush appearing on his skeletal face. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Izuku was in the common room on the couch using Dabi as a pillow when that green-haired woman walked in. She gave him this teary smile and spoke to him. Izuku, I know you don't remember me, your memories were stolen or something, I don't know, but I'm your Kasan and I love you. A throbbing pain made itself known as she spoke. Shut up, 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 shut up. Izuku slammed an open palm against his skull as blood started to drip from his nose. I am the son of all, for one my mother died in childbirth and I have never been quirkless. He repeated this sentence to himself as more blood came from his nose. Inko bit her lip and kneeled down in front of him on the floor. When had he fallen? She grabbed the back of his head and pulled him into her chest with a tight hug. Her head rested on top of his. Midoriya, Izuku, you're my son, no matter what has happened to you, no matter what you remember, I will always love you. Tears soon replaced the blood as small memories came back to him. Tamura sat at the bar trying to call Bunny. Arf, damn it, why won't he pick up? He slammed the phone into the table, accidentally laying all 5 fingers onto it, making it crack and turn to dust. Tamura calmed down. A calm voice sounded from a TV that read audio only. My son will pick up eventually. The voice took a darker turn as it spoke. He knows the consequences for not contacting us quite well. Izuku lay in the common room watching TV. His eyes were red and puffy and a tissue was in his nose. But he never felt better even with the throbbing pain in his skull. He climbed off the couch and Yaoyorozu, who he had been using as a human body pillow. The greenette didn't hear her disappointed groan as he walked toward the bathroom, a subconscious sway in his hips, drawing the eyes of the few students that were still awake. He had opened the door to the bathroom when his arm was grabbed and he was violently pulled in and thrown to the ground. Deku! A voice growled out. What do you want, Bakugu? The explosion user was obviously half asleep as he towered over the greenette on the floor. His eyes were half-lidded as he sat down on top of the smaller boy straddling him. The larger blonde leaned forward like he was going to kiss him, only to fall asleep on top of him instead. Izuku only had one thought running through his head. The F just happened. A shattered mirror appeared in a black void. The shards were everywhere in the void. Small shards floated back to the mirror. They fused back with the few shards that remained within, allowing green hair to be barely seen. Izuku eventually wriggled out from under the blonde. He left the sleeping blonde on the floor and entered the bathroom. Once he finished his business, he left the room and headed to his dorm. Stripping out of his clothes, he collapsed onto his bed. that one thought still running through his head. The next day the villains sat in the classroom not caring that Eraserhead told them to sit in their seats. Dabi sat on Izuku's desk and Toga sat on Izuku's lap despite his protests. The Yandere stuck her tongue out at any of the students that glared at her jealousy. Eraserhead informed the hero wannabes and villains of what they were doing today. Rescue training. With All Might, Eraserhead, and a third hero. The 20-plus teens were shoved onto an open layout bus. All of them dressed in their costumes. Once they reached their destination they filled out and meet with the third hero who would be overseeing them. 13 who had a powerful quirk if a bit risky. They were led inside and the rescue hero described what they would be doing in the training facility. Izuku saw Eraserhead move over to 13 and talk about the missing All Might. 13 spoke to them of their powerful quirk and told them of how unsafe some quirks could be. As the rescue hero finished, the lights of the facility flickered off and a black portal appeared in the plaza of the building, dozens of people walking out. Our favorite Yandere jumped and waved at the villains. "Handyman, you're here." The black portal disappeared from the plaza and reappeared around the students. "Kurogyri, what's going on?" Izuku spoke to the black portal. The hero students looked at him questioningly. "I'm sorry, Bunny, but Tamura Shigaraki has forsaken you and the others. You are no longer associated with the League." A portal swirled around Izuku and the two hero students who were near the villain. The portal reappeared behind the brunette villain. "Did you separate Bunny from the group?" "Yes, Tamura Shigaraki." Scratching at his ashy neck, ruby-red eyes glared at the hero students. "Then send the second Nomu after them." A tall, emaciated male towering in height with deep black skin and an exposed brain looked at the brunette. "Nomu 26, find Bunny and eliminate him." It nodded its head and walked into the black portal. A black portal that led to the same location of our favorite broccoli boi. Izuku, Tokoyami, and Ojiro landed in the fire-covered landscape of the conflagration zone. The greenette stood looking at the two hero students on the ground. Do I leave them to die and try to escape or stay and try to regroup with the hero brats? Izuku, look out. Izuku, lost in his thoughts, was nearly injured by a villain. The villain's large muscled form glared down at him, liking burnt orange lips. "Hell, have some fun before I kill you, brat." Flames licked at the villain's body as he activated his quirk. In seconds his arms were covered in orange flames. The villain dashed at the trio. Ojiro and Tokoyami, still recovering from the nauseous sensation of traveling through Kurogyri's warp gate, were in his path. Izuku, in the seconds before the villain reached the two, had a dilemma. Do I save them and injure myself, or do I let them die to gain an opening for attack? Stop thinking of you yourself for once. Emerald Eyes lost focus for a second but regained it quickly as the greenette jumped in the way of the villain's charge. He almost screamed as his body was filled with white-hot pain. But Deku stopped himself, biting his tongue and subconsciously remembering the first lesson his torturer taught him. "Stopping screaming, you stupid brat," he roared, striking the boy's head with his massive pliers. "Every time you scream it just makes it more annoying for me and for painful for you." He grabbed a mallet and pulled his arm back. "So, shut the up." With each word he slammed the mallet down on the boy's genus. But Izuku kept the screams in, biting his tongue nearly in half in the process. The man dropped the mallet and turned away, straightening his suit jacket. "See, you're already learning now. Heal up so we can have our next little session." He walked away, leaving the silently sobbing boy to heal. "Why you think that hurts?" Energy spiraled in the boy's hand, shaping into a compact ball. "It's nothing compared to what I have suffered before." The energy exploded outwards, engulfing the villain, and about a 1/5 of the zone, in a destructive blast that left nothing but scorched earth. Nuclear doom. The towering, emaciated form walked in down the street of the fiery hellscape, following its nose to the scent that its master had ingrained into it. Bunny's scent. Izuku woke up cradled in the arms of Tokoyami's quirk, Dark Shadow. White-hot pain coursing through his back. He had a thundering headache, and it didn't help that he kept getting jostled around as Tokoyami ran. "Why did you help me?" he rasped out. Tokoyami and Ojiro looked back at him in surprise. "Why wouldn't we?" Ojiro asked in surprise. Because I'm evil A and you're G good, why would you save someone as vile as me? The heroes in training stopped moving as their passenger began babbling insanely. Oh god, I've killed people, what would mom think of me? Dark Shadow put Izuku on the ground as he curled into the fetal position, tears pouring from his clenched shut eyes. Ojiro crouched in front of the sobbing Greenette. Are you Izuku or Deku right now? I don't know. Pale hands pulled green hair taut as he sobbed brokenly, bringing his head to his knees. I don't believe we will be able to speak to him very well at the moment, Ojiro. It would be best to simply focus on escorting him and ourselves out of here. This is my attempt at Tokoyami. Ojiro's tail wrapped tightly around the Grient, pulling him from the ground as the two hero students began running once more to the exit Izuku had created with his devastating attack. They had nearly reached the massive steaming hole when a large emaciated form landed in front of them. Its velocity making cracks appear in the obsidian ground created by Bunny's attack. Shards of the volcanic glass stabbed into the towering form's feet, but it walked towards them regardless. It was as if it didn't feel any pain. Dull golden yellow eyes focused on the Greenette, who was still babbling. It roared as it spotted him charging the two heroes in training. The towering beast in humanoid form crashed onto all fours and opened its mouth inhumanly wide, allowing Tokoyami and Ojiro to see jagged, yellow teeth. It looked like it was going to charge the trio and attempt to tear them apart with its teeth. Then its quirk activated. A swirling vortex appeared in its mouth, pulling the trio in like a black hole. Bird Boy summoned Dark Shadow using his quirk as an anchor for himself and Ojiro. But Izuku began to slip free from Ojirio's grip. He used his tail to send himself into the air and grabbed Izuku. The blonde used his tail to chuck the Greenette back to Tokoyami, who caught him in Dark Shadow. Ojiro! He was mere inches from the towering figure. The black void had nearly consumed him when a leathery, rope-like tongue wrapped around him. It pulled him away from the void and to where it originated, Izuku. When the figure finally figured out that its attack isn't going to work on them, closed its inhuman maw and began standing up. Obsidian shards pierced the figure's hands and feet. Viscous black blood coming from the wounds. Its dull golden yellow eyes focused on the trio and it dashed at them, its arms spread wide. Tokoyami used Dark Shadow to keep the towering form back after he managed to put Izuku down. But his quirk wasn't nearly as effective as normal with the bright light of the fires. Sharp talons pierced Dark Shadow and the living shadow was torn asunder. No! It ran at them and smacked Tokoyami away, sending the bird boy through a concrete wall. Ojiro stood in front Izuku, his tail raised as the figure approached him. The animal in human form slashed down on the blonde's tail, leaving deep gashes in the strong limb. As Ojiro cried out in pain, the thing smacked him away, sending him into the concrete wall. It slowly approached the exhaustion-filled Greenette, drool dripping from his inhuman maw. The beast picked him roughly, its hands on his abdomen and its talons digging into his already ruined back. Dull golden yellow eyes looked into exhausted Emerald as it opened its mouth wide and placed the exhausted boy in its toothy maw. Its tongue made his head slick with its slobber as it liked his head, savoring his flavor. As it was about to bite down, Izuku placed his hand on its bony chest. Tamura's gonna have to try harder than you to kill me. Had the Noma been able to scream around the boy's head, it would have. Boiled blood. Its blood bubbled as heat filled its veins. Scorching hot steam burned its veins. The steam escaped in any way it could, burning through the thing's veins, muscles, and skin, until the thing was reduced to steaming and bubbling flesh. What little remained of the thing's maw was still clamped around his head. Izuku pulled himself from the remains, a mixture of slobber and bubbling flesh and blood coating his head and hair. He looked at the hurt hero students. Ojiro, can you walk? The blonde slowly stood. I think so. He spoke slowly, pain pulsing from his tail. What about you, Tokoyami? All he got for a reply was a pain-filled groan. Izuku walked over to the bird-headed boy and crouched down, picking up the boy, giving him a piggyback ride, biting his lip from crying out in pain as the boy's body was against his ruined back. He grabbed the boy's legs tightly and looked at Ojiro. Come on, we need to get back with the others. Ojiro nodded, his walking slowed by the pain coming from the gashes on his tail. Once they stepped outside the building, they saw a large form shoot through the sky, going through the dome of the building like it was wet paper. They returned to the plaza as quickly as possible, where they were quickly rounded up by teachers and brought to Recovery Girl, who healed them with her quirk. Izuku and Tokoyami both fell asleep due to the sheer amount of energy the healing process stole from them. Tokoyami woke up in the middle of the night in a bed not his own. After a moment he realized that he was in Recovery Girl's room. He sat up in the dark and saw a shivering green-haired figure. Climbing slowly out of the hospital bed, he approached the shivering figure. "He's having a nightmare." The Chicken of Darkness looked down at the green-haired villain. After a moment of deliberation, he pulled the covers down from the shivering boy and reluctantly climbed into the bed, pulling the greenette into a weak embrace. Izuku moved into Tokoyami's touch, pressing his smaller body into the taller boy's, making the taller boy blush as the greenette's plump rear was pressed into his crotch. The bird-headed boy sighed and pressed his face into the greenette's soft hair. "Smells like freshly cut grass." They fell asleep there cuddling. In a black void, a broken mirror slowly gained back shards, slowly allowing a pale forehead and beautiful emerald eyes to be seen. Given enough time, the mirror would become whole once more. But will Izuku have that time? Tamura landed onto the floor of the bar. Blood flowed from his bullet wounds. "Kurogiri, help me, you dash dot." "Tamura!" A voice yelled from the TV screen in the bar that read audio only. He slowly looked up at the screen. "Sensei?" The voice that came from the screen was full of anger as it spoke to the hand-crazed brunette. "Come to my room. Now." Tamura flinched at the violent tone of the voice. "And Kurogiri, don't you dare help him." Misty Bai looked at the brunette on the floor and sat onto a stool to watch him slowly crawl to Sensei's room. The floor was made slick with Tamura's blood as he slowly crawled to a dark room. His voice filled with pain, he spoke into the dark room. "You wanted to see me, Sensei?" He wheezed out. "Come here, Tamura," came a voice. Tamura crawled into the room, coming to a pair of fancy but shoes. "You tried to kill my son." "It wasn't a question. He wasn't worthy, Sensei. It's my right to be your successor, not some brat." This may have been the wrong thing to say, as one of the fancy but shoes found its way to his head. "Do you know what your punishment is?" His head was forced against the ground. "I don't know, Sensei." The voice was cold as it spoke his punishment. "You're going to destroy all of your little hands." The no that came from Tamura was heard all the way in the US of A. Tokoyami sat in the common room contemplating. What he was contemplating were his feelings for Midoriya. "You like him?" Dark shadow teased in his head. He for once was glad that he had a bird head, as a blush appeared under the feathers covering his face. "I do not." "Sir." "Shut up." "Whoa, Broyami, I wasn't saying anything." Tokoyami looked up and saw Kirishima and Mina on another couch in the common room across from him. His blush deepened and could be just barely seen on his feather-covered face. Tokoyami stood up and muttered a quiet apology and quickly walked away, walking into the elevator and planning to go to his floor, only for the button that was marked 1V instead. Dark Shadow. The living Shadow looked at the bird-headed boy. "Just talk to him and get your feelings out there. Besides, if you don't, I'm going to tell him myself." Tokoyami glared at the Shadow as the elevator doors opened. He reluctantly walked to a door marked Midoriya and slowly wrapped his hand around the doorknob, turning it slowly, reluctantly, and opened the door, allowing a massive amount of smoke to hit the Chicken of Darkness. Coughing, Tokoyami tried to fan the smoke from his face. "Ah, shit." Once the smoke cleared, Tokoyami walked into the room and saw the three villains with a bong. "Where did you even get a bong, or weed for that matter?" Izuku shrugged and placed the bong on his table. "I have my sources." What he means is he has a storage quirk that can hold basically anything he can wrap both hands around. Dabi deadpanned. Izuku's eye twitched as he looked at the scarred boy. "Really, did you have to tell him how I snuck it in?" Not like then can confiscate it from us anyway. We've already used it all." The greenette turned away Dabi and turned to Tokoyami. "And before you say anything about the drag use, let me say this." He looked like he was about to say something. "That I blame Dabi." Izuku jumped up, ran out of the room. Dobby running after him. Toga the entire time was just sitting there eating an entire steak dinner. Where did you even get that? She shrugged. I honestly have no idea. Tokoyami eventually managed to go to his dorm. After weaving around the two villains, he sat onto his bed looking to the ceiling of his dark room. So you ready to admit it? Dark Shadow said, appearing from his chest and looking down at the bird by its arms crossed. Tokoyami's red eyes avoided Dark Shadow's glowing yellow. I admit that I am attracted towards Midoriya Izuku. Good job. Now to text this voice message to him. Red eyes snapped to the living Shadow's hand. In its hand was Tokoyami's phone. Dark Shadow no. Dark Shadow yes. Tokoyami punched his quirk in its face and snatched his phone from it. Oh man, that really hurt. Sorry, but I can't let you send this to him. Dark Shadow held where its nose would be and glared at him. Sighing, the Shadow spoke to him. All right, fine, you don't have to send it to him. But promise me something. What? Glowing yellow stared into angry red. Promise me you'll man up and tell him. Tokoyami stared at his quirk. Reluctantly, he stuck out his hand saying, Fine. They shook on the fact that Tokoyami was going to announce his feelings. Just not anytime soon. Wait, what dash dot? The Shadow was cut off by Tokoyami deactivating his quirk. The detective known as Tsukachi spoke to several of Yuda's teachers about the villains they had encountered at the USJ. We did question the villain students, but they apparently couldn't give very many answers. Dobby and Toga both were relatively new members and didn't know much of the inner workings of the League, and Midoriya, even though he lived with the League for the majority of his life, has no knowledge on the origins of the members. Simply that the villain known as Tamura Shigaraki lives with the villain All for One. Principal Nizu nodded at the information. The heroes hadn't expected much. We should talk about something else that happened at the USJ incident. The heroes and detective looked at All Might. And what is that All Might? Asked the small white-furred mammal. The heroic actions of young Midoriya during the incident. He did save 2 other students. More than once, in fact. Spoke up the 18+ rated hero Midnight. Which is why I believe he should be granted more freedoms than the other villains. Izuku sat in the 1A classroom rubbing his bloodshot eyes. I smoked way too much last night. Eraserhead, bandaged to hell and back, had hobbled into the classroom and was saying something about the sports festival. The Greenette knew of the festival, of course. It was how his Fath All for One learned of quirks that interested him. While the hero students are going to be a part of the sports festival to gain offers for internships. The man's eyes focused on the 3 villains. The villain students will be participating to show their progress in their rehabilitation. Dobby rolled his eyes. Toga sighed in boredom. Izuku propped his head up on a hand. Which is why you'll be allowed to take off your quirk restraints in select areas to train. All of the villains lit up at this, our green-haired protagonist especially. While Izuku no longer had to wear the straitjacket, he still had to wear anti-quirk cuffs that after a while hurt his wrists. So none of you can slack off on training your quirks. Class dismissed. All of the students got up to leave. Midoriya, stay back for a second. Eraserhead called after him. The Greenette waved for his fellow villains to go on without him. Walking to the bandaged hobo lookalike, he quirked a brow. Yeah. The hero spoke to the boy in his most tired tone. Let's make this quick. Due to your heroic actions during the USJ incident, you are now allowed freedoms that your fellow villains aren't. Such as given supplies of your choice to decorate your room and the removal of your anti-quirk cuffs. The Greenette's quirked brow raised higher on his forehead. Someone walked into the room. I am here. To remove you cuffs. Izuku's eye twitched as he saw the giant American-obsessed hero. He held his cuffed hands out and sighed in relief as the stiff cuffs fell to the floor. The boy tried to leave, but a heavy hand was laid on his shoulder. Young Midoriya, I would like to talk to you. Aizawa, could you please leave? Izuku, even while not being able to see the hobo hero, could tell that he was annoyed. But Eraserhead nevertheless hobbled out of the room. The boy everyone wants turned to the hero. What do you want, you big yellow DLD? All Might's jaw dropped at the name. Blood spurting from his open mouth as he accidentally reverted to his normal self. Big yellow DLD? Hi, did you call All Might that? Because I don't like him. That's not a good reason. Once All Might recovered from his shock at the nickname, he looked at the greenette. That is to say, he said, tapping his index fingers together as a small blush appeared on his skeletal features. Is he embarrassed, or is that just my imagination? He's act tool ym barasid. Spit it out already. All Might closed his mouth and looked at the greenette with his sunken-in eyes. Would you mind if I were to go on a date with your mother? Izuku looked at the blonde with a blank face. Before he yelled in surprise. Wait, what? A yell that all of you heard. I'll kill you, was the first thing Aizawa heard as he stepped back into the 1A classroom. His eyes, though hampered by the bandages, saw a certain green-haired villain attempting to kill the number 1 hero with a flurry of punches and kicks. As All Might frantically dodged the greenette's blows, he tried to calm him. To little success. And now, young Midoriya, perhaps we can talk about this? A missed kick to his smiling face was the petite greenette's first response before he yelled at the blonde. Stay away from my mom. All the while Aizawa just stood there watching as his student attempted to kill a teacher. Maybe I should stop this. Or maybe not. All Might probably said something to set him off. While he contemplated, All Might just barely dodged a kick that had been aimed at his crotch. And I'm not really paid enough to deal with this sheet. Izuku managed to punch All Might in the massive scar that covered most of the left of the hero's chest, making the hero revert to his actual form and blood to spew from his mouth. Izuku kicked the skeletal hero in the chest, sending the hero to the ground. The greenette raised his foot above the hero's head and prepared to stomp his sheet in. Yeah, I might get fired if he actually kills him. So I'd better stop him now. The injured hobo hero drop-kicked the greenette, knocking his tiny butt out. Izuku, once he woke up from the dropkick, changed his clothing. Switching to a black pair of yoga pants, a white tight-fitting long-sleeved shirt, and some sneakers, our broccoli boy went to the gym where students with strength-based quirks trained. Izuku had a bit of a liking towards physical quirks, which was why he had so many quirks that relied on brute force. But he didn't just have strength-based quirks. In his arsenal were a stamina quirk and an endurance quirk as well. Together they made workouts last forever. Not to mention something else. Izuku, once he got to the gym, found the heaviest weights he could and stuck them onto a barbell. All of the weights together equaled about 3 times his body weight at about 390 pounds. Grabbing the barbell with both hands, he lifted it using a couple strength quirks and rested it on his shoulders behind his neck, and began doing barbell squats. How else would he have gotten the butt that all the guys of 1A plus Dabi drool for? Little did he know a pair of scarred boys were skipping out on their training to watch the show, and several of the guys and girls with strength quirks that were there. After he worked out with his strength quirks for the day, Izuku had retired to the common room, which was where a certain scarred boy found him. Leaning over the side of the couch, Dabi poked the back greenette's head, trying to gain his attention. He eventually did when he got an elbow to his scarred face. What the hell do you want, Dab? Can't you see I was sleeping? Yeah, I saw that you were, and I thought you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. Annoyed emerald eyes looked into turquoise. What? It's just that I'd think you'd be more comfortable in a bed, preferably mine. Izuku rolled over now, laying on his back. He quirked a brow at the scarred, slightly older male. Really, and whose bed would that be? Oh, you know, anyone's bed, mine. I could carry you there if you wanted. Izuku leaned up and grasped Dabi's scarred chin. You would do that for me? I'm flattered. A slight blush appeared on Dabi's face just above his scar tissue-covered jaw. Of course I would. Izuku stuck his arms out to the boy with hair dyed black. Then pick me up already. Dabi wrapped one arm around Izuku's back and another around his legs and lifted him up. Izuku wrapped his arms around the other male's scarred neck. Scarred boy number 2 carried the greenette to the villain dorms. Behind where the 2 villains had been talking, a certain other scarred boy's eye was twitching as he crushed a can in his right hand, as ice grew uncontrollably fast from his right side, while fire exploded from his left side. Once they reached the villain dorms, Dabi kicked open Izuku's door and gently laid the greenette onto the bed. Night, Zuku, Dabi said as he tried to leave the greenette to sleep. only to find the green net stubbornly holding onto him. Each time he tried to pull away, Izuku's hold grew stronger, until the green net eventually pulled the scarred boy from the ground and onto the bed. Dabi was forced into the small green-haired boy's chest. Resigned to his fate, Dabi sighed and rolled over, so that Izuku laid on his chest while he was on his back. "Night to ya," the green net murmured into the boy's scarred neck. Eventually the 2 weeks they were given to train ran out and they had to compete in the festival. Our villainous trifecta sat in the 1A 1V waiting room. They were dressed in the PDE clothes the school had provided them. Izuku was sitting on Dabi's lap, his legs crossed, playing with his hair. Toga leaned against the scarred boy, apparently sleeping, and Dabi was just enjoying the feeling of Izuku in his lap. When Bakugu stomped up to the villains. "Deku! Kei-Kachan!" The green net quirked a brow at the blonde. "What do you want, Kacha, Bakugu?" Bakugu's eyes widened at the slip-up and a slight blush appeared on his face. "Damn it, why the hell did I almost call him that?" The explosive boy cleared his throat and said what he had come there to do. "Auntie Inko is watching the sports festival with my mom, so don't be a villainous a-hole." "Got it, Deku?" Izuku leaned back into Dabi's chest and nodded. "All right then." Bakugu stomped away, having accomplished his goal. Eventually they were called into the stadium. Class 1A was first, then 1B, then 1C, and so on, until it was 1V's turn. Our last class to welcome is 1V. As the trio entered, they got a resounding amount of boos. Izuku led the trio, his hands in his pockets, with Dabi following closely behind him, and Toga was being Toga. "Oh ho ho ho, I wonder how much beautiful blood is going to be shown today." "Shut up and keep walking, I want to get this humiliation over with," was Dabi's annoyed response. "Geez, Dabi, what's got your panties in a twist?" Izuku asked the practically steaming male. "He is." The scarred male pointed to the stands where a massive crimson-haired man with flames covering portions of his body stood. "The dumpster fire shows himself then." Izuku tilted his head and looked at the hero. And then back at Dabi. And then the hero. And then Dabi. "Dabi? I just realized something. That is." Emerald eyes glinted with mischief. "You really take after your dad in looks. To ya." Where Dabi had been standing was now an inferno of blue flames. After they had extinguished the fire caused by Dabi, they got the sports festival underway. Midnight, the R-rated hero spoke into the mic on the stage. "For our student pledge, we have our most improved villain student, Midoriya Izuku." Izuku managed to squeeze through the hero students and trudged up the stairs of the stage. Coming to the mic, he took a deep breath and spoke clearly into the mic. "I want to let you all know." In a dark room, a man whose head was almost completely covered in scar tissue leaned forward to hear his son's words better. On the couch in the Bakugu's living room, the thin Inko Midoriya sat by Mitsuki watching her son speak. "I might be here against my will, but even with that I won't hold back." The hero students looked at him with some trepidation. They had heard what the green-haired villain had done at USJ. "And I expect you to do the same, heroes." Izuku turned and walked off of the stage, re-entering the crowd of hero students. He stood beside the black-feathered Tokoyami, who blushed once he noticed the green net beside him. Midnight grabbed the mic and introduced the first event of the festival. A 4 kilometers obstacle race. When the race started, all of the classes crowded into the tunnel that led out of the arena. Izuku, observing this before he entered, stopped, knowing that with his small frame he'd never shove his way through. And maybe a STR strength quirk? No, they might use that to their advantage. A mobility chew quirk? Wouldn't work in the tight quarters. Teleportation. Now you're talking. Izuku's eyes focused on the little bit of light he could see beyond the students, and activated his only teleportation quirk. His body felt like it was being squeezed through the hole of DVD light, stretched and distorted in the void of the quirk. Clenching his eyes tight and ignoring the pain associated with the quirk, Izuku focused on that spot. And when he opened his eyes once more, he was outside of the tunnel. The majority of the first runners were 1A or 1V. In the lead was Todoroki, who used his ice to slow down the mobility of the others. "That's not gonna stop me. Little bro." Dabi spoke as blue flames curled around his arms, pointing them behind himself. The scarred boy let loose a jet of flame that propelled him forward like a jet engine, making him easily catch up with his younger brother. That was until a green robot appeared. It slapped him and sent the scarred male sprawling to the ground. Bah! Get good, Dabi! Izuku laughed at the black-haired male as he dodged the same robot that had slapped the male. Todoroki, it seemed, already had a strategy freezing one of the robots, which was so FING massive that both Izuku and Deku wondered how the hell the school afforded them, in an unstable position, making tons of metal and ice crash down, landing on 2 hero students, which would have killed them had they not had armor quirks. Izuku, knowing he needed speed to win, crouched down and prepared a mobility quirk. Yo, you are using slide and glide, right? Once his hands joined his feet on the ground, the boy rocketed forward, his speed similar to that of a speeding bus. Izuku vaguely heard Dabi, somehow, catch up with Todoroki, which led to the scarred male taunting his younger brother. In the stands, Endeavor scowled, seeing his backup attempt trying to compete with his perfect creation. Izuku was the first to reach the second obstacle. When he saw the giant canyons, he didn't slow for even a second. If anything, he sped up. The second he reached the edge of the canyon, he jumped. Leap is such a useful quirk. I'm glad I stole it from that pop star wannabe. Said Leap quirk allowed its user to jump to high heights, which in combination with the speed from the mobility quirk allowed for Izuku to easily cross the second obstacle. Midoriya, Izuku easily pulls ahead. The peacock-like music hero yelled into his mic. What do you think, Eraserhead? He has a powerful quirk and the intelligence to use it. If he wasn't a villain, he'd be a powerful hero one day. The bandage-covered hero turned to his colleague. Now shut up and watch. Present Mike deflated slightly, but perked up when he saw that other students were gaining on Izuku, who had reached the final obstacle. Izuku forced himself to an unsteady stop when he saw the minefield sign. Sheet. Standing up, he looked into the field. If only Weha had a flight chew quirk. Yeah, if only. Izuku scanned the ground. Vaguely, he heard Toga stop beside him. How the hell did she get so far? Dabi, Izuku could tell from the heat that was coming off the male in waves, also stopped behind him. Please tell me you have a flight quirk somewhere in you. I do not. Izuku turned to his fellow villains, tapping his chin as he looked at them. Hey guys, I have a really stupid idea. Whoa, what are the villain students doing? Present Mike shouted in surprise. What made him surprised was that the villain students were making a human totem pole. Dabi on the bottom, Izuku in the middle. Dabi might have enjoyed the heat that radiated from between Izuku's thighs too much, and Toga on top. I hope this works. Scarred Boy too said, a slight blush appearing just above his scar tissue, while he pointed his hands behind them. It should. Izuku said as he tightly wrapped his legs around Dabi's head in preparation, subsequently pushing the back of Dabi's head into the greenette's crotch, while also pointing his hands behind them. I just hope Izuku bleeds. Toga said while tangling her fingers in the greenette's messy curls, while also wrapping her legs tightly around his head. On the count of 3, blue flames licked at Dabi's hands. 1. Energy pulsed from Izuku's entire body, focusing in the palms of his hands. 2. Toga was playing with Izuku's hair while having dirty thoughts about the greenette. 3. The resulting blast propelled the trio into the arena, where they were declared the first 3 to cross. Izuku first, Dabi second, Toga third. After them, 39 other students claimed places in the roster for the next event. A cavalry battle. Points were divided between the 42 students. Izuku, having 10 million points, were given a few minutes to group up. Izuku obviously grouped up with Toga and Dabi. Our greenette stood in front of the other villains, rubbing his chin, thinking, we need a third. Or dash dot. He was interrupted by a cold hand on his small shoulder. Jumping in the air in surprise, he turned, flames licking at his arms. Todoroki was the one behind him. Don't sneak up on people like that. The fire and ice user's stoic face didn't change. All right. Once Izuku calmed down, he spoke to the peppermint-haired boy. So, what do you want, peppermint stick? Todoroki's eyes widened slightly at the nickname, a small blush coloring his cheeks. A small fire appearing on his right side. Coughing slightly scarred by, one spoke to the smaller greenette. I would like to be on your team. The other villains, Dabi especially, looked at him with bewilderment. Why would you want to team up with us, Shudo? Spoke the heavily scarred Dabi to his younger brother. This seems like it would be a good team to reach the finals with. As well as the fact that we don't need to hunt down any points. He said, pointing to Izuku. Midoriya has all we need. Their team was structured like this. Todoroki took the right wing, while Dabi took the left. Toga was the front horse, leaving Izuku as their rider. The second that they were able to move, Todoroki stomped his right foot down, creating an iceberg that disallowed any attacks from their right, allowing Izuku enough time to construct a strategy. I think we should use a tremor chokework. Agreed. Izuku leaned over Dabi, which the scarred male took advantage of to touch Izuku's, but while hiding it as keeping the greenette in the air, and held his slightly above the ground. But maybe with a sound quirk as well. Energy pulsed through the ground. Izuku opened his mouth wide and let out a scream. Explosive reverb. That scream became an explosive blast of sound which, when combined with the tremor quirk, destroyed the ground on the left side of Team V, which caused multiple teams to be disqualified. Izuku pulled on Dabi's long gravity-defying hair to bring himself to an upright position. Dabi, when I give you the signal, cover the area in flames. Staple Face nodded. And the signal is? Izuku smirked. You'll know it when you hear it. Every other team who wished to try and take the villain team's headband was forced to go through a choke point. Except for Bakugo. Because Bakugo doesn't care about the rules. He came flying above them using his explosions to avoid the ruined ground that Izuku had created. The explosion user rocketed towards Team V, planning on stealing the greenette's headband. To you now. Don't call me that. Blue flames roared upward just before the spiky-haired blonde could steal the headband. Damn it. FNG Staple Face BSRD. Izuku turned to the blonde and screamed, using the same sound quirk as before, blasting the blonde away. DKU. The blonde nearly hit the ground before he let out an explosion, sending him back into the air. Bakugo decided against attempting to go after the greenette once more and blasted himself back to his team. The other teams began attempting to fight Team V. To little effect. Team Kendo attempted to use Ibra's vines to sneakily steal the greenette's headband. But Izuku had activated a quirk that gave him extra eyes. One such eye being on the back of his neck. Her vine was quickly turned to ash, while Team Yaoyorozu attempted to corner them, which didn't work in the slightest. Due to the team having 3 heavy hitters, who could focus their attacks on any forward attackers, the main reason for their creation of the choke point, easily defeating many of the hero students. When the cavalry battle ended, the only survivors were Team Kendo, Team Minoma, Team Bakugo, and of course Team V. They were given a noonday break so they could rest for a little while and fill up their likely empty stomachs. While Izuku was eating with his fellow villains, Kaminari and Mineta came up to him. Hey Midoriya. Izuku looked up from his katsudon. What do you want? The grape-haired pervert had a small cocky smile as he spoke to the greenette. Did you know that you can get a reward for dressing up as a cheerleader? A single groomed green brow quirked at the grape-haired pervert. Really? Kaminari chipped in. Yeah, all of the 1A girls are doing it. With that, the 2 perverts inched away, leaving the greenette there with his fellow villains, who are having a conversation with their eyes. Dabi broke his eye contact with the blonde girl and spoke to the petite male. I think you should do it, Izuku. Izuku turned to the scarred male, his plump lips open so he could eat the katsudon that was in the chopsticks he held. After swallowing the food, the greenette spoke. You can't be serious. Toga leaned onto the greenette's back. Hugging him from behind, she spoke. I agree, Izuku. Izuku rubbed his temples and sighed. Fine. But if they're lying, I'm going to kill them with their own quirks. Later, when it was nearly time for the tournament to begin and Yude had rolled out their fleet of cheerleaders as pre-game entertainment, with a little addition. What kind of fan service is that? Asked a bewildered present Mike. In the field with the cheerleaders stood the girls of 1A and Midoriya, all wearing the clothing of cheerleaders, each with an annoyed expression on their faces. Several feet away were Mineta and Kaminari, giving each other thumbs up. Izuku's eye twitched, dropping the pom-poms as he stomped towards the two perverts. Slowly they looked up at him. Kaminari tried to calm the greenette down. Hey Midori, ow! Kaminari was cut off by axe kick to his jaw, knocking the electricity user out. Mineta was knocked out a different way. His passed out from blood loss, along with several others, due to gaining a heavy nosebleed from gaining a very good view of Izuku's underwear-clad butt. He even wore the panties. Inko watched her son in the cheerleader outfit kick another boy with a bewildered expression on her face, until Mitsuki slapped her back while laughing. At least he has your figure, Inko. This made the emaciated woman crack up. And soon both women were laughing, until the final event of the festival started. You guys have any quirk ideas? 'Cause I really want to add some more quirks to Izuku's arsenal, and I want him to have his own ultimate combination, like his daddy's. So if you guys have any quirk ideas, please comment them. I'll credit you in the next compilation of Izuku's quirks. The first match of the first round of the finals tournament. The voice of Present Mike filled the stadium as Izuku and the hero student he was fighting stepped onto the arena. From the villain rehabilitation corsets. Midoriya Izuku. Izuku stretched and allowed the power of his multitude of quirks flow through his small frame. Versus Minoma Nito from the hero Course B. The blonde Deech across from him smirked. The rules are simple. Force your opponent out of bounds or immobilize them. You can also win by making your opponent say, "I give up." You think you can fight me? Izuku quirked a smooth green brow at the pompous blonde. A villain like you will just be defeated by the heroes like always. Before Izuku could reply, the ridiculously loud voice of Present Mike roared out into the stadium. Start! The second the human peacock had said that, Izuku allowed his quirks to flow in earnest. Minoma dashed forward towards the greenette. He simply needed a single touch and he'll be able to use all of the greenette's power. But as he managed to get halfway across the arena, he was hit in the stomach by a fist. Izuku had activated muscle augmentation, had used the quirk on both his arm and legs. Minoma was sent flying back. But thanks to Izuku's melee attack, Minoma now had the ability to use all of the greenette's quirks. Though he had no FING idea how any of them worked. He at first tried to use the same strength quirk that the green-haired villain was using. But it only resulted in him nearly getting hit again and his arm gaining the appearance of a bear's. You have no idea how to use any of my quirks. Izuku spoke, smirking at the confused Minoma, who tried and failed once more to use the strength quirk. This time getting lizard-like scales. Our broccoli-haired boy sucked in a deep breath and used explosive reverb. Sound turned into a wall of force smacked into Minoma, blasting the Deech to the edge of the ring. Until the blonde responded with his own scream, which created another solid wave of sound. The two meeting and essentially having a tug of war. Until Izuku started to run out of breath. But before he stopped to take a breath, he saw in his peripheral vision Minoma's shadow. Izuku for a split second stopped screaming and took in a breath. In the second before Minoma's blast of sound could hit him, Izuku activated another quirk, making Minoma's shadow shoot upward, morphing into a tentacle and lifting the blonde. I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going. The tentacle reared back and yeeted the blonde out of the arena. Izuku was declared the winner and calmly walked back to the stands. While Minoma had a temper tantrum about losing to a hot villain. Todoroki's fight is the same, so I'm gonna go to Dabi's. Izuku watched as Dabi and some girl with vines for hair entered the ring. The girl attempted to fight the pyromancer with her vines by sending them underground. But Dabi simply turned them to ash and calmly approached the girl. Each time she attempted to use her vines, Dabi simply turned them to ash. Until he was right up in her face, glaring down at her with a blue flame in his hand. The girl quickly forfeited. Next was Mina versus some girl who could enlarge her hands. Mina won, due to some fancy but dodging. After those two fought was Kirishima versus this dude who could spin his fists. Kirishima won due to pure endurance. Next on the list was Toga versus this girl who could split her body into pieces. Toga somehow won. Even though she had no knife and her quirk was incredibly non-combative. After her was a plain-looking boy and a girl whose hair made her look slightly like a mushroom. Mushroom Girl won by encasing the plain-looking boy in mushrooms, completely stopping his movement. Lastly was Bakugo versus some dude with pitch-black skin and silver hair. Bakugo won because of course the a-hole did. Didn't see call Kakanivet. Izuku didn't respond to his other half. Izuku had been walking down the hall towards the entrance of the arena when he came across a certain human dumpster fire. "Oh, you're that villain kid." The greenette looked up at the flame hero. Only now that he was so close to the volatile hero did he truly realize the traits that both Dabi and Todoroki had gained from the number 2 hero. Both of the man's children had muscled bodies. Like the massive man, except they aren't nearly as bulky. His sons had both gained the man's handsome looks. Dabi was close to the man's height and Todoroki was probably going to be around the man's height in a few years. Izuku mused this as the man was talking. "And you're friends with my backup, huh?" The boy's emerald eyes snapped to the larger man's turquoise. "What did you just call Dabi?" This seemed to confuse the man. "Who the hell is Dabi?" Letting out a annoyed say, the greenette elaborated. "Tuya. Dabi is Tuya." Endeavor blinked as he said that. "Really? That's what my backup has taken to calling himself? The name of his failed twin." This seemed to crack the man up. Enough so that the dumpster fire in human form didn't notice that Izuku had left. Or that Izuku has taped a sign that read, "I abused all of my children because I wanted a tool to surpass all might," to the hero's back. Izuku walked into the stadium just as he had the first round and stared into Todoroki's mismatched eyes. Rolling his shoulders, the greenette waited as the seconds ticked by for the match to start. Midoriya. The mismatched gray and turquoise eyes of Todoroki glared into his emerald. "I'm sure Tuya has already told you about what my father has done to me and my siblings." Izuku nodded. Distantly he heard Present Mike ask if they were ready. "It's why I refuse to use his quirk and why I will win." An icy glare pierced Izuku's very soul. "So I can fully forsake that BSRD. H's Chu quirk?" Before the greenette could respond to the peppermint-haired boy, Present Mike had cried out start. And in the very next second spears of ice was sent towards the greenette. As the spears of ice sped towards Izuku, he made a split-second decision. In 1 second the ice collided with him, and in the next the ice was turned to water by white flames that had erupted from his arms. Thunderous fire storm. "Man, I love this quirk." Titabadish, the fire doesn't work at long RA ranges. A wall of ice came from Todoroki once he realized the first attack hadn't worked. Izuku pulled back his left arm, allowing the white flames to dissipate and allowing black sparks to take their place. Those sparks in the next few seconds became bolts of black electricity that formed a cone around Izuku's arm. The cone's head being over Izuku's open palm. When the wall of ice was mere inches from hitting the greenette, he turned that cone into a massive bolt of black lightning. The lightning shot forward and pierced through the ice, making the wall crumple like paper. "Is Izuku?" "What?" Izuku dodged another set of icy spears. Should he help Todoroki? "What?" Todoroki attempted to send a glacier at the petite greenette, only for it to be blocked by a wall made from the concrete arena. Why the hell should we help him? B, because he needs help, A, and that's what H-heroes do, and he's really ho-dashed. A sheet of ice covered the floor of the arena as Todoroki amped of his glacier to crush the wall of concrete. Izuku reinforced it with pillars of shadows. "Did you nearly call him hot?" "And no, I would never." Aha! The stalemate of ice versus stone and shadow went on for and ever. "I'll look, just GI give me C control and I'll help high him." Hell n dash dot. Izuku was cut off by a pounding headache. Holding his head as it throbbed in pain greater than a migraine, he felt his other self force his way into the forefront and force him into the back. Deku took a moment to orientate himself and just barely dodged the glacier as it finally crushed the wall of concrete. Todoroki. As the ice and fire user sent spears of ice at the greenette, his foe tried to speak to him. "Yo, your quirk isn't your father's." Emerald eyes glared into mismatched turquoise and gray. "Refusing to use your power." is just another way for your father to control you. Power flowed through the greenette's veins as his two personalities briefly became one. So stop being his pawn. Stop being his tool, break free from the shackles of your refusal. Todoroki's eyes widened. And fight with your flames. Because that's what they are. Emerald eyes holding a light unlike the dulled light of Izuku or the brightness of Deku stared into Todoroki's widening eyes. It's yours. Your quirk, your power. The power that had been flowing through the greenette focused in his arm. His arm ached and shifted as all of his power was focused into the limb. While Todoroki's wide eyes glazed over as, he assumed, suppressed memories forced their way to the surface. Shuto sat with his mother watching a broadcast that featured the #1 hero. Shuto. The crimson and white-haired child turned to his white-haired mother. Her gray eyes looked into his mismatched gray and turquoise. You want to be a hero, don't you? He looked at her as slowly nodded. She smiled and ruffled his hair. I want you to know, she said as she stopped ruffling her hair and wrapped her arms around the 4-year-old, pulling him into a comforting hug. That's okay. I want you to live however you wish, and if you want to be a hero then that's fine. She rested his chin on top of his head, looking at something that Shuto couldn't see. No matter what, I'll love you, Shuto. Empty gray eyes glared into her husband's turquoise as she hugged her son. As the memories surfaced, embers began surfacing from his flesh. I'd forgotten. Until they grew into a raging inferno as Shuto let go of his oath. I'd forgotten that you do not have to be bound by your blood. Shuto shifted into a stance. Helping your foha? Not very villain of you, Midoriya. He said, looking at the greenette. I want to be a hero no matter what. The flames melted away the ice that had been around the peppermint-haired boy. In the stands, 2 fire users watched this, each with a different reaction. Dabi's was total surprise. And Endeavor's was, well, it was unique to say the least. But both were excited to see Todoroki finally use his full power in a fight. Todoroki stomped his right foot down, making ice cover it and making spires of ice grow. As flames exploded from his left, Izuku's right arm burned with pain. As muscle fibers grew from his legs, drastically increasing their strength. The hero made of cement known as Cementos jumped up and slammed his hands down, sending a wave of concrete to the arena to create a series of walls, while at the same time yelling at his fellow hero. Midnight, we need to stop them. If they continue, it'll be bad. She nodded and tore away her sleeve, allowing purple gas to flow from her skin into the air. But before either could finish their attempt to stop the students, the two sent their attacks at each other. Later, Izuku woke up. His entire body ached and burned. So you're awake? A tiny old woman sat on an office chair looking at him. She held a clipboard. You just barely managed to survive that fight, Midoriya. Her voice held a reprimanding tone. Okay. His throat, just like the rest of him, was sore. Can I leave? She rubbed her temples and glared at him. I suppose. But if you feel dizzy or anything of the sort, come right back. Izuku nodded and slowly climbed out of the hospital bed. Can I have my normal clothes? He looked down at his hospital gown. Because this thing is really cold. Dabi stomped down the hall of the UA's Sports Festival Stadium, blue flames burning through the top of his P.D. uniform. Tuya! A loud, angry voice boomed as he stomped past the stairs. The scarred male stopped and turned, his angry turquoise eyes looking into an identical pair. What do you want, Endeavor? The giant, muscular so-called hero's arms were crossed as he glared down at his slightly shorter son. Do you actually think you can stand against my perfect creation? Dabi clenched his fists, flinching slightly as his staples got pulled by this action. My brother is not your anything. Endeavor's glare grew stronger at the scarred man's words. Tsuchi belongs to me, just as you and your other siblings do. The hero stomped forward, bearing down on his son. Need I remind you of what happened the last time you disobeyed me, Tuya? He grew a cruel smirk as he glared at Dabi. Dabi twitched and instinctively stepped back as Endeavor's beard of flame flared up. Once he realized what he did, Dabi gritted his teeth and breathed deep through his nose. Breathing out through his mouth, Dabi walked past his father. But before he was out of the man's range of hearing, he quietly spoke to the man. "You will never touch me or my siblings ever again." Dabi and Shudo glared at each other from their places at the two sides of the arena. The taller of two was twitching with rage from his short conversation with his father. "Hey Shudo." Shudo crossed his arms and quirked a smooth white brow at his brother. "Don't you dare hold back." Small blue flames appeared on Dabi's torso. "Because, little brother." The scarred man's hands twitched. "If you do, I'll never forgive you. Especially after how much you hurt my Izuku." Present Mike chose that moment to start the fight. The preceding second, two things happened. First, a massive explosion of blue flame blocked the sight of the spectators. And second, a massive glacier was created to block the flames. That glacier was nigh instantly reduced to steam and water. In the steam, the brothers ran at each other with flames licking at their flesh. They both sent a massive stream of flame at each other. Blue and orange mixed in the steam, creating a brilliant mix of the two flames. Eventually the steam began to clear enough that the two could be seen. Dabi pointed his hands downward and sent out a constant stream of his super hot flames, propelling him into the air. Though with little balance, he used this air superiority to back up all the way to where he began to the fight. After an unsteady landing, the scarred man clasped his hands together, making a cone shape with them. He funneled the flames through the cone he made with his hands to create a far more accurate long-range strike. Dabi winced each time he used his quirk. While short bursts of power weren't too bad, this much use of his quirk hurt like hell, especially since his little bro was packing as much firepower as he was. Every blast of fire he sent out was either met with another that came from his brother or was blocked by a wall of ice. "Tuya!" Shudo's quiet voice rang out into the arena. For a second Dabi stopped moving and looked at his brother, who had done the same. "Earlier you called Midoriya yours." The shorter peppermint-haired male stood in a combative stance, his legs wide and arms held slightly away from his body. "But I disagree." Ice and flame flared out from his body. "He's mine." Shudo reared back and sent a massive stream of orange and red flames toward his brother, intent on finishing the fight, only for his attack to be met with another massive stream of flame. Dabi's voice calling out to him above the roar of the flames. "Don't you dare call him that." The scarred man dodged out of the way of the flames, coming to his feet at the leftmost side. "Especially after how badly you hurt him." Dabi spread his arms and legs wide. Sweat prickled at his pores as he channeled his flames through his body. To himself he quietly spoke. "I always hated this attack. It's how I turned out like I am now." Turquoise eyes filled with fiery determination. "But I won't hold back. Especially not after what you did." An aura of solid heat appeared around him as he focused all of his power into a single strike. Prominence burn. His normally chaotic flames focused into a beam of pure energy that was directed completely at Shudo. Shudo tried to block it, but in the end all he could do was get out of the way. Using his ice, he propelled himself off of the arena. Landing heavily on the ground, he watched in terror as the attack his brother had used didn't stop. It just kept moving and moving, turning the concrete of the stadium into molten lava. It would have continued if Dabi hadn't been knocked out. Izuku knew the second he saw Dabi in that widespread stance that he'd have to act. Ignoring his aching body, he activated muscle augmentation and leaped into the stadium, using the extra muscle fibers to make him run faster than any normal human. Clenching his hands into tight ball, he reared back and hit Dabi in the head with all his might, knocking the larger male out. But not before he had melted a big butt hole in the stadium. "Demon never thought you had that much firepower, Dabi." "You idiot!" Izuku yelled at the black-haired flame user. Dabi had just gotten out of a surgery that was to help his scars that had been turned into new burns, as well as removing the staples that had been melted to his skin and muscles underneath. The black-haired flame user was heavily bandaged to prevent infection of his new scar tissue. "Yeah, I know. It was a stupid idea to use that attack." The scarred man rasped out. His vocal cords had been very close to being irreparably damaged by the attack he had used, as well as his voice being muffled by the bandages that covered his mouth. It's too bad your beautiful blood evaporated before I could see it, Dabi-kun. Toga said as she appeared out of nowhere leaning into Izuku's back with her full weight. Dabi glared at the blonde, who smirked at him behind the fluff of Izuku's green hair. Young Midoriya. The massive blonde form of All Might appeared through the door of the nurse's office. What do you want, you big yellow D? Can't you tell that I'm visiting an injured friend? St. Stop sig calling All Me Might dish that. No. Why and not? I don't like him. All Might visibly deflated in disappointment by reverting to his normal state. I am here to tell you that your mother is here, young Midoriya, he said in a saddened voice, before turning his sunken-in eyes to the bandaged flame user. And your siblings are here if you're up to see them. Dabi slowly turned his head to the blonde. My siblings? Ye dash dot. The blonde hero was interrupted by a spiky white-haired young man who greatly resembles Endeavor charging into the room shouting, Tuya! He quickly found the bandaged Dabi and charged through the greenette and crazy blonde. Behind him followed a woman with white hair that had crimson streaks, who quickly reprimanded him. Natsuo, you can't just go charging through people. He ignored her as he hit the bandaged villain with a rapid-fire set of questions. Where'd you go? Why'd you become a villain? Why didn't you take Shudo with you? Why didn't you visit us? Why didn't y dash dot? Natsuo, I know you have a lot of questions, but I think I'd understand them better if you asked one at a time, little brother. The white-haired man blushed and scratched the back of his neck. Yes, sorry, Tuya. The woman turned to Izuku and Toga, who were on the floor. Sorry about my brother, he was just really excited to see Tuya again after all this time. She extended a hand and helped Izuku off of the ground, and Toga, and to his feet. It was then that she managed to get a good look at the greenette. Red colored her pale face as she looked at Izuku. He's so cute. Young Midoriya. Came a rasping voice from the doorway. Everyone, excluding Dabi who couldn't turn his head very well, turned to the doorway. What? Came the irritated reply from the greenette. Even his voice is cute. The blonde, emaciated man that Natsuo had charged through was leaning against the doorway, a handkerchief that was slowly turning red pressed to his mouth. Your cough mother is cough here to see cough you. The man rasped out his words, sounding as if he was gurgling a liquid as he spoke. Izuku turned away from Fuyumi, who groaned quietly in disappointment, and stuffed his hands into his pockets. Walking slowly to the blonde. Let's go to her then. Later, when the mother and son had reunited again, two things happened. Inko first pulled Izuku into a tight hug and cried onto his soft hair, happy that he was okay. She then pulled away and said this. If you're ever injured like that again, I don't know what I'd do. Before pulling him into another tight hug. I only just got you back, I don't want to lose you all over again. All the while the blonde man watched to ensure that Izuku didn't have a villainous outburst. Inko was forced to leave after a half an hour. Apparently Yuda had strict amount of visitation time for especially dangerous residents. But before she left, she gave Izuku another tight hug and a whispered I love you. Izuku watched sadly as his mother slowly walked away with the emaciated blonde. His eye twitched slightly though when she leaned her head on the man's thin shoulder. Are they dating? They had 2 days after the sports festival to relax. Most of that time Izuku spent with his mother, who seemed to be becoming more healthy. Perhaps that blonde BSRD was a good influence. Izuku was still going to kick him in the ball really effing hard for dating his mom. The greenette sat at his desk bored to hell as Eraserhead explained that the hero brats were going to be working at some offices for a week. And as for the villains, you will be assigned to one of the school's teachers. After that, the students chose their hero code names. Izuku didn't really pay attention to them as he was thinking a single thought. Don't be All Might, 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 don't be All Might. Then the door of the room was pulled open. Young Midoriya. The blonde hero stepped through the door, his smile present as usual. It seemed he was going to start walking to the greenette, until Eraserhead's scarf wrapped around his head. You're early. The hobo-looking hero spoke as he pulled the hero out of the room with his scarf. But Izuku smirked as he watched the blonde be dragged away. When All Might finally returned several minutes later, 2 other heroes followed him. One was a little over a foot shorter than All Might and had a bulky build. He had short spiky gray hair and 2 large teeth that poked out from his bottom lip, with an X-shaped scar on his left cheek. His costume consisted of a red bodysuit with a low neckline that ended just below pectorals, with white gauntlets, boots, and belt, as well as a yellow visor that covered his eyes. And the other was... No, Dabi said, getting up as quickly as he could with the bandages that still covered him. I am not interning with that Bisudi, Dabi yelled, pointing at the third hero. Izuku could agree with his sentiment, especially with who the third hero was. Tuya, you will work under me, and that is final. The third one, if you haven't guessed it yet, was the flame hero Endeavor. He was glaring at his bandaged son with the same disdain you would show Iso. In other words, the human dumpster fire was looking at his son as if he was the scum of the earth. Smoke began to rise from Dabi's bandages as he trembled with rage. All Might, sensing a situation, stepped in between the two. Now, young Dabi, I'm sure your father wishes to make amends with you, he said, looking at the smoking male. Right, Endeavor? Turning his head, he glared at the crimson-haired hero, as if daring him to disagree so he could smash him. Double entendres are fun. The a-hole with the beard of fire nodded, if reluctantly, to the statement. Besides, it's not like you'll be leaving UA. Eraserhead chimed in from the sidelines. What do you mean, hobo man? Toga asked the teacher. Whose eye twitched at the nickname. What I mean is that the hero that a villain interns with may take them on a field trip, but the villain can only leave the premises with express permission from the principal. Dabi's bandages didn't stop smoking. If anything, more smoke came from them. Can I refuse this bullshit? All Might laughed with his booming voice. Young Dabi, this is an experience for you to know how a hero truly works in their day-to-day lives. Of course you can't refuse. Toga looked at Izuku and Dabi. Wait, so Izuku gets Dull Might and Dabi gets Endeavor? She pointed to herself, tilting her head as she did. So who do I get? Eraserhead simply pointed at the spiky gray-haired man. Said man with spiky gray hair had been slowly inching out of the classroom during the entire exchange. Wait, I know you, Toga said, jumping to her feet and pointing at the man. You're Vlad King, the hero who uses his beautiful blood to fight. He paled when she called his blood beautiful. Clearing his throat, he spoke. Yes, that's me. Following that was an awkward silence, before All Might grabbed Izuku by the collar of his uniform and held him in between his arm and side. I'm taking young Midoriya by, he yelled before charging straight through the FNG window and speeding away. In the distance, Izuku could hear Eraserhead that the window would come out of the blonde hero's salary. What are we doing here exactly? Izuku looked at the beach full of junk. The skeletal form of All Might walked into the junk, looking around. Before he stood behind an old washing machine. I am here to teach you of the things a hero must do. He placed one thin hand on the washing machine. One of these things is that a hero must not just help the people but also help the environment that we live within. The man's thin limbs bulged out as muscles rapidly grew multiple times their natural size. So it is our duty to clean up this beach so the people can once again enjoy its wonder. He crushed the washing machine into a far smaller size. Okay then. And why can't I use my quirks? All Might shook his head and returned to his normal form. This is supposed to be a workout for your body. Using your ill-gotten quirks would defeat the purpose of this exercise. Izuku sighed, looking at the skeletal man. Fine. Let's get this over with. Izuku panted heavily, sweat covering his form as he dropped another piece of metal. His body ached from all the physical activity. But he couldn't stop. 'Cause if he did, that smiling BSRD would yell at him about America and sheet. In the distance, Izuku heard whistles from passerbys admiring feminine form, running a hand through his fluffy sweat-soaked hair, before bending down, ignoring the whistles he heard, and grabbing the metal once more and charging onward with it. Toshinori smiled slightly as he watched the boy move metal slowly from the beach. The blonde hero was sure that Midoriya's mind could be mended if he were to learn the ways of a hero. He felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Looking away from the greenette, he pulled the phone from his pocket and brought it to his ear. Hello. The voice that greeted him was the voice of his friend, Detective Tsukachi. Toshi, you should come to Hosu. Looking away from the greenette, the blonde hero placed a hand on his bony waist. Why? Toshinori asked his old friend. Because the hero killer is there and I believe that the villain interning with you may be able to help stop him. Sunken blue eyes looked at the greenette. How could young Midoriya be able to help? He's just a child. The greenette was pushing a monster truck tire as he said this. Midoriya would be able to help because of his quirk. He could take the hero killer's quirk. Look, you don't need to come, but if we don't stop the hero killer, and soon the number of heroes will drop and fast. Toshinori sighed. Fine, I'll think about it, Naomasa. Izuku was dragging another piece of metal. Isn't this GRE great? No, it's really not. He huffed and puffed as he dragged the metal with his aching body. Young Midoriya. Izuku turned his head slightly to see the emaciated blonde hero. What huff do huff you want? The blonde tossed a bag at him. Suit up, we're going to Hosu. Izuku dropped the metal and grabbed the bag. Why? He asked, looking into the bag and seeing his costume. We have a villain to catch. Once Izuku had suited up, he headed back to the emaciated hero, ignoring the whistles due to the leggings he wore. Together the hero and villain got onto a train. We'll get there in a few hours. So you may want to take a nap or something, young Midoriya. Izuku shrugged and dug in his pocket for his phone. I wonder how Dabi and Toga are doing? Let's find out, Deku. He opened his phone and found the Scarred Flame user's number. And texted Scarboy number. Izuku, how's your internship going with your daddy? Dabi, never call him that again. Dabi, he's making me and Shudo go to Hosu to catch the hero killer. Izuku, wait, seriously? The yellow DLD is making me go as well. Dabi, you have fun with your mom's DLD. Izuku, next time I see you I am going to punch you all the way to you. The lights of the train flashed on and off. The voice of the train conductor came over the intercom. We will be unable to continue to Hosu due to there being villain activity. All Might looked up from the newspaper he had pulled from somewhere. The train lurched as something crashed into it, making the side of the vehicle cave in before a green-skinned form tore through it. Nomu! Izuku yelled, standing up. The emaciated hero beside him looked around for any prying eyes. Before he activated his muscle form. Fear not, civilians, for I am here. The civilians looked at massive hero with awe. Before he dashed forward, hitting the Nomu with a super-powered uppercut, sending the Nomu through the roof of the train. All Might turned around to speak to his future stepson, student, only to find that the feminine greenette had disappeared. What? Where did he go? One of the civilians pointed to the hole the Nomu had made. He went through that hole. Another civilian spoke soon after. He said something like, gotta see Dabi bye, or something like that. All Might sighed and rubbed his broad brow. Damn it. He cursed in English. Before he jumped through the hole as well. If I don't find him, and soon Inko is gonna tear me apart. And charged into the city looking for the feminine greenette. Izuku leaped from roof to roof, searching for his fellow villain in the streets below. What are you doing? I'm seeing if Dabi is okay. That yesterday is probably why he had those scars in the first place. His other self didn't respond. What the? The greenette exclaimed as a truck flew up and crashed down onto the roof, breaking through whatever the roof was made of quite easily and nearly crushing the greenette. Izuku looked over the side of the building for whatever had thrown the vehicle. More Nomu? What's the all for one thinking sending so many at once to such a inconsequential place? True to his exclamation, 3 Nomu, including the one All Might has punched through the train, were fighting with minor heroes in the city. One of the Nomu, even though it had no eyes, noticed him and leaped for the building he was on. Nope. That is the big nope. Izuku, quite sensibly, ran the opposite direction, leaping to a new building, and was about to leap to another new building, when he looked into the alley. Is that the engine boy? He stopped and looked into the alley, and sure enough saw the engine boy, a Native American lookalike, and a guy with a utter shit ton of blades. The guy with the sheet ton of blades seemed to be about to stab his sword into the engine boi but was stopped when a tendril of shadow wrapped around his wrist, making him miss and stab into the concrete. Izuku, as this happened, was sending a group text to the whole of 1A and 1V. This text was his location. Hopefully Dabi at least would come help him. Before he jumped into the alley, landing just in front of the Native American lookalike, who rasped our through grit teeth once he saw the greenette. "Kid, get out of here. He only wants me and that kid. Save yourself." Izuku shook his head as he pulled his mask from its clip on his belt, bringing it up to his face as he spoke. "I may be no hero. Hell, I despise every last one of you heroes. But I can't just let a classmate die." His voice became muffled as he spoke through the rabbit-themed mask. "If I did, I don't think I'd ever be able to face my mother." Dabi stopped moving as soon as he felt his phone vibrate, though he started moving once more before his father noticed. Digging his phone out from his pocket, the scarred boy's eyes widened at what he saw. "What the?" It was from Izuku but wasn't a normal text. Instead, it was the greenette's location. Looking up from his phone, the scarred male could see that his younger brother had gotten a similar text. The two looked at each other before Dabi slinked away, while Shudo stayed to inform their father of the situation before doing the same. Both headed for the alley shown on the map in a dead sprint. "You're no hero, huh? Yet you come to the rescue of false heroes like them." The hero killer spoke, pointing at the paralyzed heroes stuck in the alley. Izuku scoffed. "Like I said, I despise heroes. I once wanted all heroes to be killed, even those who could be seen as truly heroic." The greenette said, his voice bored. But behind his mask his viridian eyes glared at the hero killer. "But I have no one to see heroes dead. Not anymore." Izuku crouched, slightly white flames liking at his fingertips. "I'm no hero," and dashed forward, making the flames into claws as he closed in on the villain. "But I will not allow their murder," he roared, bringing the claws of flame up, attempting to rend the flesh of the villain, only to miss as the villain leaped over him, throwing several knives down, one impacting in the knee joint of his right leg, severing its tendons, making the boy collapse to the dirty ground. "You're good, kid, I'll give you that," the hero killer said, walking to the boy and tearing the knife from his leg, liking the knife before sheathing it and drawing out a longer blade. "If you survive this, perhaps you'll one day be worthy," and stabbing it into the greenette's back, intentionally missing his vital organs and pushing the blade fully through the boy's flesh to impact in the concrete. "Izuku! Midoriya!" came to voices from the mouth of the alley. Stain turned his head, looking over his shoulder at two sad-looking scarred males. It was then he knew he effed up. Before two massive streams of flame hit him at once, making the villain roar in pain as they scorched his flesh. Dabi roared in rage, charging forward at the hero killer he once admired, ignoring the other injured heroes and even his own quirk as he slammed a scarred fist into the villain's jaw, knocking the villain the ground. The scarred villain straddled the villain, punching the noseless killer in the face over and over again. "Da-re! Da-ya! Da-uya! Tuya!" his brother yelled, pulling him off of the villain. "He hurt Izuku!" Dabi roared at his younger brother, pointing at the bloodied face of the villain. "I know," his ever-stoic brother answered him. "But if you murder him, you might be taken out of the rehabilitation program and you may never see Midoriya again." This gave the villain pause. "Arg, fine. Let's time him up or something. We need to do something about Izuku's wounds." Eventually heroes came to the alley. Two of them were All Might and Endeavor. All Might was praying to whatever deity there was that Inko would let him live. And Endeavor was being Endeavor. "Shu! Tu Yuwa!" The flame hero roared in something akin to pride as he approached his children. Until the Nomu, the flame hero, had missed, swooped down, grabbing the injured greenette in its talons, pulling the boy quickly into the air. Izuku tried to move, but the pain that pulled from the wounds he suffered from practically paralyzed him. But the Nomu suddenly stopped moving and began falling, as a muscular form charged forward, leaping up and stabbing a blade hidden in his sleeve into the Nomu's exposed brain, twisting it and instantly killing the creature. Stain grabbed Izuku, pulling him from the Nomu's grip as they fell. jumping from the corpse and landing on his feet, standing as he glared at all of the heroes save one with utter malice. The villain began speaking of his ideology, making the heroes, even the number one though in his case it was fear that Stain would harm his charge further, become paralyzed with fear. Izuku didn't hear any of it, as he passed out from blood loss. When Izuku woke up he noticed three things. 1. He was in soft bed, 2. Something was laying on his chest, right arm, and left, and 3. There were two things that were digging into his hips. Opening his vibrant eyes, Izuku saw the white ceiling of the room he was in first, before he looked down and saw what was laying on him. Looking down, Izuku saw Toga laying on top of him. A wet patch forming on his chest as she drooled in her sleep, and a similar patch on his crotch as she grinding against him in her sleep. Said grinding was making the greenette develop a little problem. Sighing, Izuku looked to his left and saw that Dabi was the one on his arm and the thing digging in his side was, well, let's just say Dabi has some very fortunate genes. Wait, so if the thing digging into my left hip is Dabi's trouser snake, then whose pleasure pump is trying to F my right hip? Izuku quickly turned his head once this thought came to him, and saw the peaceful sleeping face of Todoroki. Oh, it looks like the little brother has more luck in this situation. Ida decided to wake up at this point, and instantly began shouting about how improper it was. Toga was woken up from her dreams of blood and Izuku, mostly Izuku covered in blood, by some uncute boy yelling something about improper. She sat up on the greenette, rolling her hips as she did once she noticed Izuku's not-so-little problem was pressed against her, and turned her head to pout at the glasses-wearing borefest of a hero student. I bet even his blood is boring, she thought as she pouted at the black-haired student. I don't care. I haven't seen Izuku in a day. Ida seemed shocked at her words. He cleared his throat slightly before attempting to speak, only to be interrupted by the door of the hospital room opening. Fuyumi had been forced to go to the hospital because her villainous little brother wanted to visit that cute green-haired boy. The white with red streaks-haired woman blushed slightly when she remembered the greenette's cute face. But she couldn't focus on that now, because somehow her brothers had somehow managed to get away from the woman. There's only one place those two could have gone, she muttered to herself as she walked towards the room that the greenette had been placed in. Once she reached the room, the woman could hear shouting from within. As she grabbed the door handle, Fuyumi could just barely hear the word, Izuku, be spoken by someone, a girl, in the room. Deciding quickly, the normally nervous woman wrenched open the door and saw something that she hadn't expected. There was one of Shudo's classmates, Ingenium's younger brother if she remembered correctly, who she seemed to have interrupted when she opened the door. He was on one side of the room and on the other was the most cramped hospital bed Fuyumi had ever seen in her life. That cute green-haired boy lay where he should with a 4-bag replacing the blood he had lost. It seemed he was awake, but Fuyumi couldn't tell with the extra bodies that lay in the bed along with the boy. Her brothers had each claimed one of the boy's sides, and seemed to be asleep, and on top of the boy was the female villain, who was currently sitting up on the boy looking at her. The female villain, Toga if her memory served her right, seemed surprised but quickly overcame it as she began bouncing slightly in joy. Fuyumi couldn't help but blush slightly as she heard the greenette groan out from the bouncing. Hey, you Dabich's big sis, right? The girl excitedly asked, continuing to bounce as she did, either not noticing that she was inadvertently helped with the greenette's not-so-little problem. Fuyumi thought that it may be a little bit short of being as long as her forearm, or actually taking joy in that fact. Fuyumi tentatively nodded. Yes, I'm Tuya and Shudo's older sister. You're Toga, I presume. The blonde nodded and was about to speak before a deep voice spoke, interrupting the girl's thought. Fuyumi. The woman in question turned slightly to see her father's massive muscular frame filling the doorway behind her. Oh, hello, father, she quickly said before moving out of the flame hero's way. NG squeezed into the room and glared at the bed where two of his sons lay. Tuya, Shudo, what are you doing? He growled out at the two sleeping boys. Toga pouted at the big butt hero. Hey, did you hurt Dabi? NG glared down at her. Who the hell are you and who the hell is Dabi? Enduhor growled as he glared at the girl, who in her credit didn't flinch in the slightest. Toga simply tapped the thigh of the scarred flame user. Izuku chose that moment to finally speak up. This is a wonderful conversation, but in case you haven't noticed, you're all in a hospital room with someone who nearly bled to death. The greenette leaned up slightly. So kindly either get the F out or shut up and let me sleep, cause even doing this much is making me feel really woozy. Toga giggled at the boy's words before letting herself fall back down onto his chest. Endeavor grunted at the boy's words before stomping out of the hospital room, growling at the nurses who tried to make him be quiet. Fuyumi just kind of stood there looking between the doorway and the boy's bed. Izuku, somehow, seemed to know what she wanted. He sighed and leaned up slightly. If you want to join in on this dogpile thing, then come on, we don't have all day. Before he fell back against the pillow, Fuyumi bit her lip and approached the bed, carefully climbing in. Toga making some room for the older woman. Fuyumi snuggled her head into the younger boy's neck and marveled at how big he felt against her thigh. Before she eventually faded to sleep, Izuku sighed as he collapsed onto his dorm's bed. The hospital was nice and all, but it was boring for the teen. Plus, those hospital gowns were way too breezy for his tastes, and he was kinda tired of the hungry look some of the nurses gave him. The greenette jumped off of his bed after a few moments and pulled open his drawer, intent on getting dressed in clothes he actually liked. The door to his dorm opened just after Izuku had finished tightening his belt. Hey Midoriber .. Kirishima started but stopped when he saw the scars that littered the boy's body. How did I never see this before? He was almost entirely naked that one time, but there were no scars. His eyes especially focusing on the hand-shaped scar that rested in between the boy's shoulder blades, from which spread a spiderweb of scars that stopped at halfway down his back, at the start of his neck, and exactly at his shoulders, as well as the scars present at the joints that connected his fingers to his hands, and the scar on the boy's pale neck as he turned to the red-haired hero student. The greenette's face contorted into a look of shock and horror. Get out! He screamed at the other. I Midoribro I said get out. Izuku screamed, tears prickling at his eyes as he held his shirt in an attempt to hide his scars. An invisible force slammed into Kirishima, sending him flying out of the room, its door slamming closed behind him. Kirishima was so surprised when he was blasted out of the room that he didn't activate his quirk, and it took him a moment to realize that Dabi was yelling at him. Waff! The manly boy stupidly asked, his face a mask of complete confusion. His words seemed to annoy the scarred male. I said, what the F did you do to Izuku? Dabi said, his words filled with annoyance and anger, small blue embers sparking off of his skin. Kirishima held up his hands in a way that showed defeat. I didn't do anything to him, I swear. The scarred flame user glared at him for a few moments before speaking. Then what happened? He asked, kneeling in front of the downed hero student. Kirishima began explaining what had happened and had just finished describing the scars he had seen, when a loud anger-filled yell came from the beginning of the hallway. What? Dabi and Kirishima looked up and saw Bakugo charging towards them, his hands popping with small explosions. The explosion user grabbed Dabi by the front of his shirt with his right hand and slammed the taller male into the wall. Did that hand fucker do that to Deku, you villain Bishidi? Bakugo growled out, his free hand hovering over Dabi's face as small pops came from it. Dabi, to his credit, didn't even change facial expressions as small explosions were being created mere centimeters from his face. The scarred flame user reached up and grabbed Bakugo's right wrist, and pulled the explosive blonde's hand from his loose-fitting shirt. Before speaking, I've never seen those scars on Izuku before. You saw him when he wore that thong, those scars didn't exist. Cold Blue stared into rage-filled red as Dabi spoke. The only one who could tell you about those scars is Izuku, and judging by his reaction towards Kirishima, seeing them, you won't get anything out of him. Dabi let go of the blonde's wrist before walking to the elevator. Now if you'll excuse me, I have business with my little brother. Izuku was taking deep breaths as he rested his hands on his table. He saw them. He'll tell them about them. It's not the end of the world. His other self calmly replied. Just you use the second SK skin quirk and hide them again. Izuku looked down at the scars at the base of his fingers, before reaching back to rub the hand-shaped scar on his back. The way he touched it was almost lovingly, before he let his hand drop, rolling his shoulders and cracking his neck as he did. Yeah, I guess you're right. Aizu. He could almost feel the smile that came from his other half. Taking a deep breath, Izuku spread his arms wide and activated the previously mentioned quirk. New skin pale as moonlight and soft as a newborn's bubbled up from the pre-existing skin. As the new skin bubbled up, it fused and grew, wrapping around Izuku's body, covering up his pale, scarred flesh and making his already feminine form even more so. Reaching down, Izuku grabbed the dark fabric of his shirt from where he had dropped it and pulled it on, hiding his form to the world as he walked to the door. Izuku stepped out of his room and was nigh instantly grabbed by a pair of strong hands and slammed against the wall. Deku! Bakugo growled in the greenette's face. How the hell do you suddenly have scars? The greenette quirked a smooth green brow. I have no idea what you're talking about. Izuku grabbed Bakugo's hands and easily pried them off. I have never had any scars. The redhead just saw some shadows that made my back look strange. He walked past Bakugo, shoulder checking him as he did. Now if you'll excuse, I have a date with a tuna melt. Midoribro, wait. Kirishima said, making Izuku sigh with annoyance. I know it's none of my or Bakubro's business, but I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone else, and the idea of someone hurting it It what, Kirishima? Makes you pity me? Izuku asked, turning the spiky-haired redhead. Why, no. Kirishima spluttered in surprise at the greenette's statement. Really? Because that's all you hero brats felt for me once you saw that torture sheet. Izuku held his head in his hands. Hell, even Dabi and Toga, the closest effing thing I have to friends, pity me. Izuku cried, making the two look at him with concern. I don't want any more effing pity because I have some scars. Midoribro, that's not just a scar on your back, it's like one of the large scars I've ever seen. Kirishima said, making the greenette look at him with annoyance. It covers half of your demon back, Midoribro. How would Auntie Inko feel if she learned about those scars? Izuku turned to the ash blonde, his eyes blazing. I'm going for a walk, he stated, and continued for the elevator. Bakugo and Kirishima tried to chase after him but were stopped by the elevator doors closing faster than they normally would have. Izuku sat in front of one of the school's many vending machines. He glared gloomily at the ground and almost didn't hear the purple-haired boy speaking to him. Oi, villain kid. The purplet said, making Izuku finally look at him. What do you want, eye bags? The purple-haired boy didn't seem annoyed by the nickname. Yeah, I have bags under my eyes, he said, and pointed at the vending machine. Which is why I want to buy a coffee. Now can you move so I can do that, villain kid? Izuku smirked at the boy. Maybe if you stop calling me that, eye bags, I'll move. The boy sighed and looked like he was about to pass out, standing up. Fine, can you please move, green-haired boy? He asked, his words practically overflowing with annoyance. Izuku nodded and moved enough that the boy could actually use the machine. The greenette wasn't paying much attention to the world around him, but did hear the thump from the can of coffee hitting the bottom of the machine, and most certainly did notice that the purple-haired boy plopped down beside him, leaning against him as he cracked open the can. After taking a sip and recoiling at its bitter taste, he spoke. So why are you here and not in the oh-so-luxurious 1A dorms? He asked, obviously as bitter as his drink about the topic. Izuku shrugged. They saw something I never wanted anyone to see, he stated as he stared at the base of his fingers, tracing the line of the scars with his eyes. They saw your scars, right? Izuku turned his head so fast a crack filled the air between them. He looked into the purplet's face with confusion. How'd you know that? The boy asked, his voice tense. The purplet shrugged and took another sip of his canned coffee. Because I have a similar issue, he stated before reaching up to the collar of his shirt, pulling it down and revealing a burn scar on his left pectoral. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise. Seeing this, the boy decided to explain. I lived with my parents till I was about 5. He said, pausing to take a sip of the coffee. That was when my mother did this to me. She was tired of the pointed fingers, the stares, the whispers that followed her everywhere. The boy's indigo eyes grew distant. Most of all, she was tired of me and my villainous quirk. "How you're my child, I could never know with a quirk like yours," she said that to me, her 5-year-old son. Before she poured burning grease onto my chest. He placed his hand on the shirt that hid his scar with its thin fabric. I guess she thought it'd kill me. Probably would have if my mom's landlady hadn't heard my screams of agony that filled the small apartment we live in. She called the police before breaking into the room and forcibly pulling my mother away from me. He took another sip of his coffee, not seeming to care about the look that Izuku gave him. "I've been in foster care ever since." Izuku just looked at the boy beside him. Confusion etched into his soft features as he did. "Why are you telling me this?" Izuku asked, making the purplet look at him. "2 reasons. The boy said as he held up his index and middle fingers. "1, you looked like you need someone who shared a similar experience. I may not know the specifics of yours, but we both have scars. And how those scars affect us are up to us. I wear mine as proof I survived a hardship few have gone through. You, I don't know, but you seem disgusted by them, I guess." He let down his middle finger. "2, you're just really cute," he said and started walking away, leaving Izuku to gape at his back. Before he jumped up and ran after him. "Wait!" Izuku called out, making the purplet turn to him. "What's your name?" Izuku asked, making the purplet smile. "Shinso Hitoshi," he said and took another sip of the coffee. Izuku smiled at the boy. "I'm Midoriya Izuku." The greenette stuck out his hand to the boy. "Scar buddies?" Izuku inquired, making the boy look at him, before he reluctantly grabbed the other's hand. And after a short moment he replied, "Scar buddies. Shadow control. Info, as the name says, it allows the user to control shadows. Courtesy of Plicelli of Mielanino, on Wattpad. Terrain. Info allows user to completely control the terrain they are in contact with. Courtesy of Spike the Redder, on Wattpad. Thunderous firestorm. Info user can emit short-range white flames from their arms. Can focus the flames into a long-range blast of black lightning. Courtesy of Zorio_chan 159, on Wattpad. Info, it's Popstep's quirk from Vigilantes. Slide and glide. Info, it's the Crawler's quirk from Vigilantes. Boil blood. Info user can boil a opponent's blood by placing their hand on their foe's skin. The more anger the user feels, the faster the blood rises to a boil. Nuclear doom. Info user focuses nuclear energy into a compact ball in their hand and releases it into a massive blast that, while short-ranged, is immensely powerful. The kickback is just as powerful though, as the user will lose almost all of their stamina for a good while. Trek. Info, basically the Pokemon move. Courtesy of JDragon06, on Wattpad. Houdini. Info user can teleport anywhere in their line of sight. The farther away something is, the more painful the teleport. Reader. Info user can read the aura of someone they are close to in order to glean a part of their fate. Black dying. Red in pain. Blue sad. Yellow happy. Courtesy of Inquiry 5953. Plan ahead. Info user can see about a minute into the future. Use is dangerous as overuse can result in the user having a short seizure. Courtesy of Inquiry 5953. Sinus L vitality. Info user can heal someone through skin contact. The more major their wounds, the more skin contact is needed. Extremely minor wounds such as scratches require, say, finger touching. More dangerous wounds like internal bleeding or organ failure requires, say, naked cuddling. Courtesy of Inquiry 5953. To hair. Info user's hair takes the form of extendable octopus tentacles. Courtesy of Inquiry 5953. Double back. Info user creates a small barrier that appears when the user's inner wrists are pressed together. The barrier is about 6 inches in diameter. When an attack hits it, the attack is reflected back with twice the power it originally had. Courtesy of Inquiry 5953. Toshinori plopped down onto a couch in the teacher's lounge. He hacked up a wad of coagulated blood into a white handkerchief, staring at it morosely for a short second before wrapping the handkerchief up and tossing it into the bin that was by the couch. "Geez up, you brush your teeth before you kiss my mother." A soft voice came from behind the emaciated hero. He turned in shock and looked at the young green-haired child of his girlfriend. Girlfriend Toshinori was still surprised at the fact that someone as wonderful for as her would date him in his current state, who lounged on top of the teacher lounge's counter like a cat. Young Midoriya, what are you doing in here? Toshinori spluttered, still shocked at the boy's sudden appearance. I wanted to know. He began looking the man in the eye. Have you passed one for all in yet? Sunken blue eyes widened in shock. How do you dash? No. Izuku finished the number one sentence. My uncle was the first to have that quirk, and it was created by my father. I feel it when it's near because of that connection and can recognize a wielder of its immense power. Emerald green glared into intense sapphire blue. So tell me, All Might, why when I met this wonderful purple-haired boy from the Gen Ed department that I felt that power? Toshinori coughed and quickly brought up his arm. He hacked up another large wad of coagulated blood onto his suit sleeve. Looking at it with discomfort, he spoke. I needed a successor, and young Shinso held the will and drive to be it. He said, trying to get the taste of blood from his mouth. Sadly, I couldn't help him into the hero course because I was unable to give it to him prior to the entrance exam. Izuku nodded and seemed like he was about to leave, but stopped. He looked at the man and saw a black and red aura that surrounded him. When did I turn on Aura Reader? You didn't. I did. Izuku looked at the man and could practically feel the color draining from his freckled face. Are you all right, young Midoriya? After a few moments of indecision, Izuku nodded and quickly escaped the lounge. Izuku was on top of a vending machine. He poked at the roof and gave a triumphant sound as a tile moved. The roof of the school was filled with tunnels. Izuku had discovered them a while ago but didn't tell anyone. The tunnels were incredibly tight and hard to maneuver. And that was in Izuku's case, and he was remarkably small and petite for his age. He honestly doubted that any of his fellow villains, let alone the students, could fit in here easily. Not to mention the multitude of traps that were scattered all over the tunnels. After squeezing into a tunnel that was the closest to the dorms, he had to twist around several times due to his hips being wider than the hole. He stopped and muttered to himself. Aiza, do you think All Might is going to die? His other self was silent for a while, but eventually spoke. And maybe. He hacks up a lot of B-blood. It's can't be he healthy. Izuku nodded as he rested his chin on his knees in the small space. He had to draw his knees up to his chest at times to fit in the small spaces of the tunnels. Inko would be devastated if that happened, wouldn't she? Probably. Izuku looked down at the tile that led into the room. He reached forward and pulled it away from its brethren. Crawling forward, he stuck his legs into the hole. Let's finish talking about this later, okay? His other self didn't respond as he dropped himself through the hole, quickly pulling the tile back over it as he fell. Izuku wasn't sure how, but somehow it was already the last week of June and final exams were already there. He, Dabi, and Toga were sat in a separate room from one. Snipe oversaw them as they worked. After an hour, they turned in the written half. Izuku was almost 100% sure that Toga failed. Soon after the written half, they were brought to the changing rooms and given their costumes. But once they opened their cases, the villains noticed that their costumes had been changed and made with better materials and with a more heroic look. Toga now had knee-high black boots that had crimson outsoles, white tights that had a pink stripe on the middle of her outer thigh. She had a black skirt with a light red hem, a white skin-tight shirt with elbow-length sleeves, the outer half of the sleeves with a dark red and the inner half was white, a black combat vest that was thick enough to absorb hits yet still thin enough for flexibility was strapped onto the front of her chest. She had elbow-length gloves that were the same deep red as her outer sleeves. The fingertips of the gloves ended in short razor-sharp cat-like claws. Covering her face was a buckle-style mask that had the same design as her original mask, and covering her eyes was a light red visor that held a similar design to Vlad King's. On the girl's back was a tank that was connected to 6 syringes that had extendable tubes. She had a white belt that had 2 knife sheaths, one on the left side of her waist and another on her right. In them were 2 large tactical knives, and on her back, just above the curve of her but was black sheath that held 4 throwing knives. A similar sheath was on the middle of her right thigh. Dabi's coat now had flame-proof sleeves that extended from the large metal cuffs that ended at his elbows. Ports were on the sleeves that focused his flames. The sleeves had attached gloves that had circular hole in the middle of the palm that focused his flames and lacked fingers. A blue flame design was present on the bottom hem of his large coat. Under his coat was now a light blue combat vest made to withstand the overwhelming heat of his flames. The vest had inbuilt canisters that held a form of liquid nitrogen that were connected to heat sensors and were pumped out when it senses Dobby's body temperature rising to levels he can't safely withstand. This was designed so that if he used Prominence Burn again, he wouldn't damage his body nearly as much as before. He had similar pants as before, but they now had a silver stitch design running down the middle of his outer thighs ending at his knees, which were covered by steel caps that were attached to his knee-high combat boots. The toes were covered by a steel cap with a grill design that worked as ports that focused his flames. A similar grill is present on the heel of boots as well. Izuku's hoodie was replaced by a purple long-sleeved hooded crop top that ended just below his sternum, leaving his toned stomach completely exposed. The sleeves of his shirt were black and had attached fingerless gloves, his black skin-tight leggings that a green line going down the middle of his outer thigh and calf down to his ankles. He had red shoes that had short heels that made him look slightly taller. Covering his face was his bunny mask that now had a closed smile along with a black visor in the eyes. His mask now had a built-in respirator that filtered anything he breathed in, and the ears of his mask now had a design that made it look like they had an inner ear and now held sensors that connected to the eyes of his mask, creating a heads-up display. All the students of 1A and 1V walked out in front of the school prepared for their practical. The hero students were expecting to fight robots and were surprised when their principal announced they'd be fighting teachers. All Might versus Deku and Kaken. Endeavor, who got roped in by Nizu somehow, versus Dabi and Shudo. Tracerhead versus Toga and Momo. Rest are basically the same. When their exams started, Momo and Toga started by hiding in an alley between the houses. Toga covertly looked out from the darkness of the alley before she turned to the other girl. "So, any ideas, Kriati?" the blood-loving blonde asked before she once again looked out from the cover. "'Cause I have no idea how to read eyes." Momo looked beyond the girl. "Aizawa-sensei moves fast and uses stealth," the black-haired girl nervously said as she looked behind herself for the underground hero. "He'll erase our quirks. But yours isn't related to combat." Toga looked at her smiling under her mask. "I think I see where you're going with this, Yamamo." Shoyuta stood on a utility pole examining the area. He hadn't been able to spot the two girls yet. Then man's tired eyes found a black-haired form running through the street. Yaoyorozu is running out in the open. He thought, looking at the girl before he stepped onto the power lines. But where is Toga? Shoyuta shook his head and focused on pursuing Yaoyorozu for the moment. He ran across the power lines before jumping off of the lines once he caught up with the teen. The man grabbed his scarf and threw it towards the girl. It wrapped around her legs before Shoyuta threw the other half of the scarf over the lines, pulling the girl from the ground and into the air. The ever-tired man stuck his hand into his pocket as he walked towards the hanging girl, and threw out a handful of caltrops below the girl. "Yaoyorozu, that wasn't exactly your smartest decision," he said as he looked up at the hanging girl. "You're usually far smarter than this." The man expected the girl to respond smartly, but she instead smirked at him and reached inside her belt. "What are you His attempted question was answered when a throwing knife lodged itself in his shoulder. Yaoyorozu giggled as her body began to melt away to a gray paste that fell heavily onto the ground, slowly revealing the shorter form of Toga. Shoyuta looked away once he noticed that clothing was missing. "Where is Yaoyorozu?" "No better question, why are you naked?" the hobo lookalike asked, making the crazy blonde smile at him. "My clothes overlap when I lose my quirk, so I need to ditch them if I want to properly become someone," she explained as she tried to escape the bindings. Shoyuta sighed and reached up, pulling the knife out of his shoulder before he began searching for the girl. As he ran, he could hear the naked blonde yelling at him. "Could I at least have a blanket? It's cold up here." Momo ran through the street, ducking in between houses as she did. The girl constantly created Russian nesting dolls as she ran as a way to tell if her teacher was near. After a couple minutes of running, she spotted the exit. "Nearly there." she exclaimed as she got closer. And only then did she notice that dolls were no longer appearing from her skin. The girl looked up just as her teacher's scarf raced after her. She rolled, just barely dodging the scarf as she did. Momo grabbed the nesting dolls she had tucked into her skirt, belt, thing and threw them at her teacher. What the? Eraserhead kicked at the dolls in confusion, knocking off their tops and exposing that they were in actuality grenades. Flash grenades to be exact. Momo clenched her eyes tightly shut as the grenades went off, making a blinding flash. Her teacher cried out in pain as he was temporarily blinded while the girl began running for the exit. Opening her eyes once she knew she was out of the immense light. She was almost at the gate when her teacher's scarf wrapped around her, stopping her in her tracks. It was a good plan you had, Toga had. Toga playing the decoy while you headed for the exit and then using those flash bangs to blind me, he acknowledged as he walked towards her. But this is where you fail. Momo looked at the ground, disappointment clear in her eyes, only to look up in surprise as the scarf loosened as her teacher cried out in pain when a knife stabbed into his back. Her black eyes found the thrower of the knife. Toga, still naked, waved at her as she threw another knife at the man. Momo struggled out of the scarf and ran for the exit and crossed it with seconds to spare. Dabi and Shudo stepped into the area they were fighting their father within. It was large, easily 20 acres if not more, and made to look like an industrial site and even, it seemed, had fuel following through the pipes that filled the area. The scarred male, still grumbling from having to fight the beast he had for a father, was stomping in the area when a spear of flame nearly severed his leg. It was only saved by Shudo pushing the older male away with his ice. Shudiaya! Endeavor roared as he jumped down from what seemed to be a fuel tank and began stomping towards the brothers. The younger of the two grabbed the older and used his ice to escape from their father, who attempted to burn them to a crisp. Dabi looked back at the massive man and glared at him as the flame user began charging after them. He's not pulling any punches, he thought before pulling his arm back and yelling, Shudo, how about dual firepower? The dual-haired boy looked down and nodded, stopping his flow of ice before pointing his left arm at the man who charged at them, and sent a massive blast of flame alongside his brother at the man. The blue and orange flames mixing before they attempted to slam into the man, only for him to jump into the air and sent jets of flame from his feet to avoid the strike. Sheet! Dabi cursed before he grabbed his brother and pulled him behind a large pipe. As a split second later, their father retaliated with a blast of flame of his own. Flames licked at their hiding place as a loud thump sounded as their father landed and began stomping towards them, not relenting on his torrent of flame for a single second. Dabi pressed his hand against the side of the building the pipe was connected to, and used his flames to melt the wall into molten steel, and then had his brother cool it before they both ran inside the building as the flames forced themselves into the crevice they had been hiding within. Dabi grabbed a metal shelf and pulled it in front of the hole, just before the flames slammed into it, turning the shelf into molten steel, slowly fusing it with the wall. The scarred male grabbed another shelf and forced it to join its melted fellow as he spoke to his younger brother. Endeavor is all brute force. He's not gonna let up until he completely obliterates us, he said, turning to his brother. Which is why I'm going to fight him and you're going to run for the exit. Shudo quirked a brow. Why you? He asked, crossing his arms. Dabi sighed as he walked past his brother, looking at the wall they had escaped through as it began to glow red hot. You don't have enough control over your fire to counter him, and your ice would just be melted by his flames, he stated as he came upon another wall, pressing his hand against it, and started to melt the steel far quicker than their father could. Ergo I fight him with my superior firepower, he said as the wall melted away under his hand, while you use your ice to speed away to the exit. Enji tore through the melted steel of the building his sons had escaped into. He looked for them in it with a scowl on his flame-covered face, and eventually found another hole in the wall. So my perfect creation and backup are running then. I'll simply have to force them to fight me as they truly should. Enji's lips pulled back into a cruel smile as he stomped towards the hole, only to be hit by a blue concentrated beam of heat and be blasted back through the hole he had made in the building, slamming into the pipe that was by the hole. Said pipe exploding as the fuel that had been inside it was ignited once the beam of heat melted through the steel of the pipe, engulfing Enji in a fiery explosion. Dabi panted as the heat that consumed his body thanks to his prior attack was slowly cooled as the canisters in his vest released their contents onto his body. He watched the smoke that rose from the pipe he had blasted his father into with a small twinge of satisfaction. Then the building he had blasted his father through rumbled as the flame-using hero tore through it in a fiery rampage. And just as the man tore through the wall that faced him, the scarred male simply raised his arms and smirked at his enraged father. "Ready to burn you, old beastardy?" he asked, making the crimson-haired man growl. "'Cause if not, this'll SCK for you." Dabi took in a deep breath and roared as flames exploded from his body, before they condensed into a blue aura of heat. Prominence burn. And sent another concentrated blast of heat at the man, blasting him through the building once more. "Man, I hope Shudo gets there soon. I don't think I can do this for much longer," he thought as he ducked under a low pipe that was at his waist and began crawling under the pipes before a wave of heat slammed into where he had been. A scream of rage quickly following his disappearance. Shudo used his ice to drastically increase his speed by rapidly creating it to push him along through the maze of pipes that made up the area. "It has to be there." He finally spotted the exit and amped up the ice he was outputting to reach it before his father caught up to him. "Shoo! Ashit!" Ashit was right as his father landed in front of him and sent a geyser of flame at the boy, who narrowly avoided being burnt to a crisp by redirecting his ice flow to push him out of the path of the flames. "Did you really think my backup could defeat me, Shudo?" the man who called himself Shudo's father said as he stomped towards the boy. "Maybe," the peppermint-haired boy said, looking at his father before raising his arm, preparing to use the attack that both his father and brother had taught him to do. "Or maybe we knew that we wouldn't be able to defeat you one-on-one." As he spoke, Shudo looked behind the man to see a glimpse of black hair. "What are Y-?" Endeavor was interrupted by two voices shouting at once. "Dual prominence burn." Two condensed blasts of pure heat slammed into the man, one from in front of him, and the other behind where Dabi has managed to sneak up on him. The massive flame user collapsed to his knees as smoke rose from his massive frame. Dabi, his clothing smoking and blackened, crawled over and slapped the cuffs he had been given onto his father's ankle. "We win cough, you old bstrd." Izuku and Bakugo stepped into the massive area that their practical was in. As he waited for the test to start, Bakugo's eyes constantly darted to the greenette. Not as many would have focusing on his cough assists, but instead on the boy's masked face. He could almost see the boy's brilliant emerald eyes behind the glass of the eyes. Bakugo looked at him and grit his teeth. "Look, Dek, Izuku, there's something I nay dash." But whatever the explosive blonde was about to say was cut off by the starting bell, as well as the massive blast of pressurized air that blasted through the fake city's main street, decimating the buildings of the false city and blasting the teens away. Loud booming footsteps filled the torn street as a massive form clouded in kicked-up dust walked to the teens. "Who really cares if I destroy this city?" the owner of those booming steps asked as he stepped out of the dust. "OSSH sheet," Izuku and Deku both thought as they watched the massive blonde stomping towards them. "How the hell is he so scary? If you think of this as just an exam," All Might said, his voice carrying a dark tone, "and not a real fight, then you'll be sorry," the large blonde said before he stomped down and sent a massive gust of air at the two, blasting them backward. Izuku flailed in the air before he activated a quirk. His hair twisted, growing fleshy before his locks slowly congealed into tentacle-like shapes under his hood. The greenette grit his teeth in pain before two of those tentacles shot out, blasting back his hood as they did, one grabbing Bakugo's arm and the other using suckers that had appeared on it to latch onto the wall of an alley. Izuku pulled them both into the alley before he dropped the blonde and stomped down, activating Terror Rain and raising a wall from the concrete behind him. The greenette shook his head as his hair returned to its natural state. "Ugh, I hate mutant quirks." Izuku looked at the wall, worry etched in his face. "We gotta move the big yellow deal bust through that wall like it's a soggy cracker." He grabbed the blonde's arm and pulled him up. Come on, we need to M-dash. The greenette was cut off by the blonde slapping his hand over the boy's mask-covered mask. Shut it, nerd. I want to say what I started to at the entrance. Bakugu said, glaring at the greenette's covered eyes. Later. Especially if we want to pass. The ash blonde looked at him. Fine. Izuku wrapped his arm around the blonde's torso. You may want to hold on. He warned as crouched slightly, flexing the muscles in his toned legs as he did. Bakugu, heeding the boy's warning, wrapped his arm around the boy's waist, his hand laying on the soft legging-clad flesh of the boy's right hip. Izuku jumped straight up from his crouched position, activating leap as he did, allowing them to easily jump high into the air. He then used the quirk to jump from the sides of the buildings to quickly rise to the rooftops. Now, Izuku said once they were on the rooftop of a building. How about we talk some strategy? Kaken. All Might ran through the torn street, muttering to himself as he did. Now where did they go? He looked from the sides of the buildings as he ran. Since they disappeared, are they running for the exit? Or are they planning a massive assault? The man continued to look from building to building, but didn't think to look up. Hey, you big yellow DLD. All Might twisted around, blood spurting from his mouth in shock from both the name he had been called and from the fist slamming into his face, before a massively powerful explosion slammed into it, stunning the man until a foot slammed into his crotch, making him let out a squeak. Izuku jumped from the roof of a building, using leap to rocket forward as he yelled at the man who was more than likely effing his mother. Hey, you big yellow DLD. He roared, making the man look at him, allowing him to slam his fist into the blonde's face. Before he reached up and grabbed the large pin, pulling it back before he pulled out the trigger, allowing its contents to fire out, blasting out, making his head slam back. Before he kicked the man in his. Oh dear God, his mother is going to be limping forever. The muscled man let out a squeak. Izuku landed on his feet in front of the man who seemed to be paralyzed as he stood. That was for dating my mother, he said before he pulled his leg back. And this is for probably banging my mom. And kicked his leg forward, slamming it into the man's already bruised crotch for a second time. The Blonde America fanboy fell to his knees in likely extreme pain. His mouth hung open in a silent scream. Izuku covered his fist in white flames and slammed it into the man's sculpted face. The greenette cracked his neck and back, and slammed his foot into the man's crotch one last time for good measure, as the bell signaling his and Bakugu's passing rung. Katsuki stood outside the exit waiting for his fellow test-taker. When the greenette finally passed through the exit, Katsuki noticed something he hadn't in the chaos of the test. The spiderweb cracks of scars that Kirishima had described to him were visible on the boy's back. Izuku, your scars, he exclaimed in total shock. Why'd stop calling us Deku? I liked it. Izuku looked at the ash blonde. My scars don't matter. What does is that we passed, he said before looking away. Izuku, at the start of the test I was going to tell you something, Katsuki said, looking at his oldest friend. I wanted to, that is to say. Arg, damn it. The ash blonde yelled, unable to say what he wanted to say to the boy. So he instead stomped away, belittling himself for his inability to speak. Izuku just watched the ash blonde walk away with a confused look that was hidden by his mask. The next day, Izuku was sitting in the classroom, smirking slightly when he found out that 4 of the 1A students had actually failed. They were bemoaning their failure and the fact that they wouldn't be able to go to the summer camp, until Eraserhead revealed the truth to them all. It was simply a logical ruse, the erasing hero said with a sheet-eating grin on his face. Ida began complaining to the teacher about it, making the students lose faith in the teacher. Dabi chuckled, making the square look at him. Oh, sorry, I just find your statement utterly hilarious, engine boy. The scarred male said, pretending to wipe a tear from the scar tissue below his eye. Eraserhead sighed. Well, either way, it's not like what I had said was a pack of lies, the man said, making the students that had failed jump up in joy until he continued speaking. And those who failed need this training camp more than the rest of you. To put it bluntly, you 5'll have it worse than if you had stayed on campus, he said, making those 5 deflate. Later, just before the class had ended, the hobo lookalike of a teacher looked at the three villains. If you two decide to go to the mall to buy things for the camp, you'll need a hero student to escort each of you, he stated, looking at Dabi and Toga. Though you don't need a escort, Midoriya. He then left the class, leaving the students to discuss what they'd do before the camp. They had eventually decided on going to the mall. Seeing some of them needed stuff. Especially the villains, since they didn't have anything that would work well in a forest setting. Dabi was being escorted by his little brother and Toga was being escorted by Mina, who had nothing better to do. They had decided to split up to shop and meet back up at about 3 p.m. Izuku decided to go to a sporting goods place to grab a durable bag with the bundle of cash that Yurei had provided to them. But on his way he was stopped by a hand that wrapped around his throat. "Hey Aizu, how about a little chat?" The owner of the hand, Tamura, if you hadn't guessed by now, had led him into a cafe and made him sit down at one of the booths, ordering 2 black coffees to make the cafe's barista go away. "So Aizu, how are you liking being in U.A?" The brunette asked, one of his ruby eyes glaring at him past thick bangs. Izuku sighed and looked out the window. "It's been nice. I met my mom. Turns out Pops has been lying to me all my life. So how's life been on your side?" "Tenko?" Tamura seemed to relax at the name. "What do you mean, Aizu?" The brunette asked, confusion apparent in his one visible eye. "No. You got to ask a question and now I do. That's how this works, Tenko," Izuku stated, making the brunette sigh. "Fine. Ask away." The brunette looked at the older boy. "Why did you try to kill me?" Tamura looked at the boy for several moments before he spoke. "I was jealous of you. I was supposed to take on Sensei's empire one day, not you," he said, his voice sounding dead. "But now I've realized that now that you're on the hero side, I'm Sensei's only choice." Izuku looked at the other oddly haired male. "So what did you mean about Sensei lying to you all your life?" he asked, leaning forward. "Turns out he wasn't telling the truth when he said my mother was dead and he tortured me, Tenko," Izuku said, making the brunette lean back in shock. "And he'll probably do it again if I came back." Tamura looked at the brunette. "Sensei sent me here to take you back. But I decided against it. Especially if what you said is true." The brunette climbed out of the booth, dug in his pocket for a second and dropped enough yen to cover the coffee. He grabbed the cup that had been put there while they had been talking. "See ya later, Aizu," the brunette said, walking away, leaving Izuku to sit in the booth. As he walked away, Izuku looked at the older boy's empty hand. The hand that had caused the scar on his back. The one scar on he had that he couldn't remember how he gained it. Izuku eventually left the cafe half an hour before the students had all decided to meet up. He rushed to get everything he needed before he ran out of time. As he was buying a sturdy bag, his phone vibrated in his pocket. After digging for it, he pulled it out and saw it was a text from his favorite scar buddy. "Brain drain. Hey, you going to that summer camp thing?" "Cinnamon roll. Sadly, yes." "Why, I thought it was only for hero students and 1v. Brain drain. Well, yeah, except I may or may not be transferring to a certain class." Cinnamon roll. "Wait, what? You're joining 1v? Brain drain. No, dude." Cinnamon roll. "Hey, least we'd be sharing the same floor." Brain drain. Cinnamon roll. "And I already know that you'd probably try to sneak over to my room in the night." Brain drain. "I will literally brainwash you just to make you slap yourself." Cinnamon roll. "Oh Shin, so daddy, where are you gonna make me slap myself?" Brain drain. "God damn you." Cinnamon roll. Brain drain. "Sometimes I hate you." Cinnamon roll. "You know you love me." Brain drain. "I'm not even going to dignify that with a response." Cinnamon roll. "And that just proves my point, scar buddy." Brain drain. "WLT?" Cinnamon roll. "'Cause I love you." Brain drain. Cinnamon roll. "Pft your way to easy to tea shinken." Izuku smirked at his phone as he walked to the meet-up point. Maybe this training camp won't be so boring after all. Eventually it was time for the training camp. All of 1A, 1B, and 1V were crowded onto the school parking lot. With an extra student. "This is Shinso Hitoshi," Eraserhead explained. "He's being transferred from the Gen Ed course to 1A due to recommendations from both All Might and myself." The teacher, who looked strangely similar to Izuku's new friend, or as everyone else knows, his friend's another person trying to get into Izuku's pants, explained, making all of the students present look at him with surprise and suspense. I mean, it isn't every day two heroes recommend you, let alone one of them being the number. Izuku charged to the purplet with a cry of, "Scar buddy," as he did. The greenette brought he fellow oddly-haired teen into a tight hug. Everyone else, pining for the broccoli booty, "Man, this is way too much fun to write," glared at the purplet's smug face as he also hugged Izuku. They eventually broke the hug when Eraserhead coughed. "Anyway, everyone climb into your buses," Eraserhead said, looking at the classes. 1v you're with 1A. They all piled into a bus. Izuku, Dabi, and Toga shared a single seat. Toga in the window seat, Dabi beside her, and Izuku sitting on both of their laps using Toga as armrest as he read a thick book he had snatched a while back. Shinso and Todoroki sat across from the villain trio, Bakugo and Kirishima sat in front of the trio, and Jairu and Yaoyorozu sat behind them. Shinso, Todoroki, and Dabi were all chatting about their shared scars, and Izuku. The greenette forcefully inducting the latter two into the scar buddies. Jairu and Yaoyorozu looked at each other for a moment and then the fluff of Izuku's hair, before they reached forward marveling at the softness of his green locks. Bakugo and Kirishima just fell asleep. After an hour-long bus ride, they stopped at a patch of flat circular land. 1A and 1V climbed out of the bus and stretched it. Izuku stretched, making his back and limbs pop, as two women in hero costumes and a child climbed out of a car. The greenette looked at them before he realized something. "Wait. Where's 1B at?" The two women stood next to each other before the brown-haired one began speaking as she moved into a heroic stance. "Lock on target with our sparkly eyes," the blonde woman continued, "while our cute stingers sting," before they shouted together as they struck a heroic pose. "We're the wild pussycats." The child that had come with them just glared at them and the hero students. Though when he spotted Izuku, he looked away, making the greenette quirk a brow. Eraserhead explained that they'd be the heroes that they'd be training with. And then the brown-haired hero mentioned that the forest that stretched out in front of them. Both of these statements struck a chord with Izuku. The greenette started running for the railing and activated leap as he reached it, soaring over the edge into the forest. "It's test," he yelled just as the blonde-haired hero agreed when she used her quirk on the land, making it turn into a tsunami of earth, pulling up the students of 1A and 1V into it. As he began to fall to the earth, Izuku could just barely hear Dabi and Toga yelling, "God damn it. I hope Izuku loses some blood," over the almost liquid flow of earth, before it slammed into the ground, depositing the 20-plus students on the forest floor. Izuku flipped as he fell and shot out his tongue after activating whip-like tongue, making it wrap around a branch of a tall tree, using it to absorb the kinetic force of his descent, eventually letting go when he thought he had lost enough speed, landing on the ground on all fours in a cat-like stance. The muscles in his legs, arms, and rear flexing, the other students, both male and female, keeping track of the latter, as they absorbed the impact. Izuku looked up as a massive paw slammed into the earth in front of him. He twisted his right hand as he activated Terra Rain and sent a pillar of earth and stone through the creature's chest, making it begin to fall apart, clumps of what Izuku assumes was earth hitting the ground around the greenette. He climbed to his feet as more of the earthen creatures emerged from the trees. "Well, this is gonna be fun," Izuku said, cracking his neck and rolling his shoulders as he shifted to a combative stance. The only response from the earthen creatures were roars of rage, perhaps at the loss of their brother, as they charged the gathered students. Hours after they had been dropped into the forest, all of 1A and 1V stumbled out of the woods. They were all exhausted and hurting from having to fight the earthen creatures. Dabi's skin was literally smoking from forcing his flames to a temperature that turned the creatures into lava. Izuku was being carried by Dark Shadow, who seemed to be smirking at Tokoyami. "Told you should have told him a long time ago," Dark Shadow teased inside of Tokoyami's head. "Then you'd be the one carrying him and be able to touch his really ni dash." "Dark Shadow!" Tokoyami yelled as he deactivated his quirk. Shuji caught the snoozing greenette with one of his many arms and shook his head at the chicken of darkness. The multi-armed hero student brought Izuku close to his chest and, unlike what the majority of his classmates would have done, didn't take the opportunity to grope the greenette. Although he wouldn't have had the chance to, as Pixie Bob pulled the greenette from his grasp. "Oh, aren't you just the cutest?" She holding Izuku in her arms bridal style. "I wonder just what a cutie like you is, Packy Dash." Her curious question as to what the small greenette had in his pants was cut off as Mandalay grabbed the boy from the blonde woman and elbowed her in the stomach. "Forgive her," Mandalay said, looking at the gathered students who glared at the blonde woman. "She's in a bit of rush to get married." Izuku groaned at the brown-haired rescue heroine shifted him in her arms. His emerald eyes slowly opened to glare at her before he turned his head to look at the gathered students. Activating Houdini, he reappeared beside his scar buddies, plus Toga, with only minor nausea from the quirk. Izuku looked at the three heroes that were present and spotted an outlier. "Whose kid is that?" he asked, pointing at the kid from before who looked away from him. Mandalay, after getting over her shock at Izuku's teleportation, explained. "He's my nephew," she said, gesturing for the boy to come closer. "Could it come here and say hi?" The boy didn't budge, just drawing his hat lower to hide his eyes. Izuku shook his head and approached the boy, sticking out his hand to the boy for a handshake. "Hey, I'm Midoriya, Izuku, villain captive of UA," he said, making the boy give him a strange look before he quickly looked away. "You're a villain?" he asked in a tone that almost sounded like admiration that made Mandalay give him a surprised look. Izuku nodded, making the boy look at him past his hat. Kuda reluctantly reached forward and shook Izuku's still outstretched hand. He quickly pulled his hand away and turned from the older boy. Kuda stuffed his hands into his pockets and walked away, trying to hide a small blush as he did. "Get your luggage from the bus," Eraserhead said, looking at his gathered students. "After you've settled in, we'll have dinner in the dining hall." After they ate dinner, all of the students, hero and villain alike, went to the hot springs that were present at the training camp. Izuku, with second skin activated, sat almost entirely submerged in the water, resting his head on Dabi's scarred arm as said scarred male chatted with his younger brother. Bakugo glared at Dabi, jealous of the older male. All the while Mineta was staring at the wall that divided the male and female sides of the hot springs. He knew that this was likely his only chance to see the girls naked, and he was certainly going to take that chance. And yes, while Midoriya and his wonderful but was on the male side of the hot springs, Mineta's words not mine, Mineta knew that he'd be literally murdered by the greenette if he tried to sneak a peek. So he decided to scale the wall. Grabbing one of his sticky ball and ignoring the outcry from Ida, he began rapidly climbing the wall, only to be stopped in his pursuit by Kuda. "Before you become a hero, learn to be a decent person," the kid said before, shoving the sticky-haired boy off of the wall and down to the male students below. "Thanks. You rock, Kuda," came the voice of Mina from the other side of the wall. Kuda looked over to the female side of the hot springs and saw a beautiful sight. The young boy reeled back in shock, blood spurting from his nose as he fell from his perch on the wall. Kuda screamed as he fell, drawing Izuku's attention. Izuku flexed his legs and activated leap, jumping out of the water and soaring into the air, grabbing the young boy and holding him closely to his chest, inadvertently making more of the boy's blood escape his nose as his face was pressed into the older male's wet chest. "Thank you for saving him," Mandalay said, looking at the boy as she ruffled the hair of her unconscious nephew. "If you weren't there, he could have been seriously injured." Izuku looked at the unconscious boy. "Before, when I met him," the greenette said before he looked at the hero, "it almost sounded like he admired me when I told him I was a villain." "Why?" Mandalay looked at him with saddened eyes. "His parents were heroes," she said quietly as she turned to look at her unconscious nephew. "They were murdered not long ago by a villain while they were protecting some civilians." Izuku looked at the boy. "Who was the villain?" he asked, his voice strangely cold. Mandalay looked at him strangely. "Why do you want to know?" she asked, making Izuku look at her. "Who was the villain?" he asked once more, his voice still cold. "Muscular," Mandalay said after a moment, making Izuku's eyes widen. That idiot has the intelligence of a bag of rocks, but he has the strength to level a skyscraper. Izuku said, making Mandalay's eyes widen in shock. You know him? She stated, making Izuku nod. Yeah. The dumb BS dirty joined around the same time as Dabi and Toga. Izuku explained as he looked out of the window, his sight clouded by his thoughts. He always took the missions that he thought would have the most fights possible. The greenette turned away from the heroine. I'm tired, he said, starting to walk away from the shocked woman. I'll see you tomorrow for training, I suppose. And with that he left the room and the heroine behind. Izuku snuggled into his sleeping bag. He was so consumed by the thoughts of Muscular that he couldn't sleep. If Kuta's parents were who he thought they were, then Izuku was present the day they had died. He, Muscular, Mustard, and Twice had all been a part of a bank robbery job. Mustard and a clone of him created by Twice would knock out all of the civilians in the bank, while Izuku, who had gained a similar quirk to Muscular's not the long before that day, and Muscular tore the bank vault door from the wall. But it went awry when Muscular saw two heroes just outside the bank and decided a quick fight was in order. It was quick and brutal, like every fight the brute took part in. But surprisingly, the two heroes, even though they didn't have combative quirks, managed to hurt the man. It was admirable that they kept fighting until the very end. Though at the time Izuku didn't really care. What did it matter that two more worthless heroes died? But now Izuku felt a grief he had never known before. He could have saved those two, he could have stopped Muscular, he could have stopped the boy's life from being ruined. But no, he just stood there as the heroes, as the mother and father of the young boy he had met were torn apart. These thoughts made it almost impossible for the boy to sleep that night. He eventually did, though, as he was cradled in the overwhelming warmth of Dabi's embrace. Izuku, Dabi, Toga, and all of 1A were woken up at 5:30 a.m. and dragged out into a clearing. The greenette was being carried piggyback style by Shinso, who was using this to feel up the boys but making all of the students around, while the ones who were mostly conscious anyway, glare at him with jealousy. Starting today, Eraserhead began. We'll be focusing on upgrading your quirks. We're going to be trying to push you beyond your limits, he said, making Izuku look at him with one tired eye. So try not to keel over on me before then. Toga's training mostly consisted of the girl trying to keep up a transformation for as long as possible on as little blood as she could, as well as trying to make it so her clothes didn't overlap onto the person she copied. Dabi's was trying to force his flames out for longer and longer PRDS of time without harming his body further. And Izuku's was a fist fight. A fist fight with Mandalay and Ragdoll, to be exact. Izuku tried to dodge a blow from Mandalay, only for one of her claws to cut his freckled cheek. The greenette hissed as the woman tried to encourage him. That dodge was pretty good. You'll have to improve, though. Ragdoll leaped from the side, her arms outstretched and preparing to cut his flesh. She was stopped, however, by a shadow wrapping around her ankle, flinging her away from Izuku. The green-haired woman's claws dug into the ground as she landed on all fours. That was pretty good, Midoriya. But not good enough. The deep voice of Tiger growled from behind Izuku before four claws reduced Izuku's shirt to shredded cloth. What the? Revealing the hand-shaped scar on his back as well as the spiderweb of scars that spread from it. Izuku froze as the three heroes looked at him, or more accurately his back, horrified. And Midoriya. Ragdoll stuttered, her normally bright smile gone. What happened to you? Tiger placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Did one of the villains you were harm? Why dash? The hero was interrupted by Izuku slapping his hand off of his shoulder. It's none of your business, Izuku said, giving the hero a glare. Midoriya, as your instructors, it is most certainly our business if you've been hurt, Mandalay said, giving him a concern-filled look. I don't need any of your effing pity, Izuku roared, making the students of 1A and 1B alike as well as Dabi and Toga stare at him. Izuku, did Handyman do that to you? Toga, who was currently transformed to be Mandalay, asked, her eyes wide in shock. Izuku glared at her, making the girl flinch back. It's none of your business either, Toga, he growled before he stomped away. No one could find Izuku for the rest of the day, until he reappeared for dinner. He grabbed his food and avoided the rest of them. And when Dabi and Toga attempted to sit with him, he made a wall of shadows appear around him, blocking them. After Izuku had eaten, he stood and went to put his bowl in the sinks. As he did, he saw the small form of Kuda stomping off into the woods. Izuku grabbed another bowl and filled it with food before he went to follow the young boy. Izuku came to the entrance of a cave. Kuda sat outside it, glaring at the forest. "Hey, you must be hungry," Izuku said, holding up the bowl as he walked to the boy. "And no, I'm not." Kuda stuttered, a small blush on his cheeks as he tried to glare at the older boy, only for his stomach to immediately growl, making that blush deepen. Izuku smirked and sat down beside the boy, carefully handing it the boy, who took it in his small hands. "You hate heroes, right, Kuda-kun?" Izuku said, making Kuda look at him. Kuda nodded, looking away from the teen. "Yeah. It's just I can't understand why they'd risk their lives and leave behind the people they love like that," he said, glaring down at the forest. "I'd never do that, someone I loved." Kuda said, his eyes darting to Izuku. The greenette sighed and wrapped an arm around the boy. "You have a lot of hate, kid," he said as he pulled Kuda into a one-armed hug. "If you let it consume you any more than you already have, then you'll become a villain, a monster like me or Muscular." Kuda looked up at him past the boy's shoulder. "You're nothing like that monster," he yelled with a deep blush on his face. His statement made Izuku chuckled. "No, I'm exactly like him," the boy said, his eyes clouded with sadness. "I've killed plenty of innocents and stood by as more were killed," he said, absent-mindedly tangling his fingers in the boy's dark locks as he stared up at him. "I'm a monster that you should stay away from, Crush or not." "See, Crush, I don't have one on why," he stuttered, his blush almost consuming his face. Izuku sighed and shook his head. "Kid, you're not the first and you're probably not the last to have feelings for me." The greenette ruffled the boy's hair and slowly stood. "But you should lose it. I'm someone you should avoid at all costs. I'm a killer that'll just get you hurt." "Geez, Pipsqueak, do you always have to be such a boring bee?" A deep, angry voice growled from behind them as heavy, thudding footsteps approached them. Izuku twisted around, shock filling his wide emerald eyes. "Muscular, what are you doing here?" he asked, forcing himself to put on a brave face for Kuda's sake. "Had that hand-loving wimp wanted to strike some fear in the hearts of you today, or some sheet like that, I guess." The brute shrugged his massive, bulky shoulders. "I don't really care as long as I get to have some fun tearing apart you little weaklings," the big blonde said, glaring at Izuku. "Speaking of tearing apart," he said, licking his lips, "I can't wait to finally break in that little butt of yours, Pipsqueak." The brute said, his mouth pulled back in bloodthirsty smile. "Hell, I may even have some fun with that little brat as a little warm-up." Izuku pushed Kuda behind him. "You're not touching him, pencil D dash dot," he growled as he crouched into a combative stance. "Kuda, stay behind me, you don't want to get in the middle of this," he said, pushing his most powerful combative quirks to the forefront of his mind. "Because this is not gonna be pretty." Muscular laughed before he activated his quirk, forcing muscle fibers out of his skin, making them wrap around his body, making his already massive muscled form even more bulky. "I always love it when they put up a fight." The muscled villain let out a booming laugh. "Hope you don't hold back, 'cause if you do I might just tear your little butt apart before I get to bend you over." Izuku growled as white flames began to grow from his arms. "I'm going to kill you, you sick F dash," he roared as he charged forward as the flames exploded from his arms. "Bring it, you little beach," he yelled as he brought his fist up in an uppercut, preparing to smash in Izuku's chest with a single hit, only for Izuku to use the weak flames to push himself out of the way, making his fist collide with Izuku's right arm and shoulder, making a loud crack sound as Izuku's right clavicle and humerus was shattered in a single blow. Izuku made a tentacle of shadow pull him away, and once his feet met the ground, forced a spire of earth to rocket into Muscular's stomach, only for it to shatter on impact. His eyes darted back to Kuda before he glared at Muscular's massive form. The greenette forced himself to his full height as his right arm dangled uselessly. "I'm going to kill you with your own FING quirk," Izuku growled. "And I'll save Kuda while I do."